April Mitchell's day began before sunrise. She woke in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Seattle, listening to the muffled roar of traffic beyond her thin walls. Each morning, she collected her courage like loose coins, stuffing them into her pocket before facing the world. She brewed cheap coffee in a dented kettle and prayed the hot water didn't cut out. By 6 o'clock, she was out the door, clad in a faded sweatshirt and jeans, her mind already bracing for whatever small disaster might greet her. At 6:20, the first disaster arrived. Her landlord, Mr. Donovan, a burly man with thinning hair, cornered her in the narrow hallway. "April, you're late with the rent again," he said, voice gruff with poorly disguised irritation. She clutched her keys, heart thumping. "I'll have it by Friday. I promise." "I just need my paycheck to clear." He studied her face, then sighed. "I've heard that promise before." April forced a small grin, even though the weight on her chest felt heavier by the second. "Yes, but this time I mean it." She hurried past him, stepping onto the sidewalk where the early morning chill bit at her cheeks. Her beat-up Honda waited under a flickering street lamp. She climbed in, turned the key, and offered the engine a silent prayer. It sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. Relief washed over her. Something had gone right. Her route wound through streets that grew progressively more affluent, the houses taller and greener, until she reached the gated community where she worked as a cleaner in one of the largest mansions around. Normally, she approached this job with a stoic acceptance. After all, it was a paycheck. But that morning, a sense of dread twisted in her stomach. She felt on edge, as if an invisible clock ticked ominously, counting down to something she couldn't name. Walking through the grand front gates never got easier. The security guard, Willis, recognized her and offered a polite nod. She waved back, balancing her cleaning supplies in one arm. "Busy day ahead?" he asked, raising an eyebrow at the arsenal of mops and sprays. "You have no idea," she replied, forcing a laugh she didn't feel. Inside, the mansion's marble floors gleamed under the overhead lights. It was almost too polished, too perfect, like a glossy magazine spread come to life. April took a deep breath. At least in these early hours, the house was silent. She'd rarely met the owner in person. She only knew his name was Nolan Sanders and that he was rumored to travel constantly. The few times their paths might have crossed, the staff told her he was in Europe or Hawaii or some other distant place. She didn't mind. Having no watchful eyes on her was a blessing. She walked into the East Wing corridor, which housed a series of lounge rooms adorned with expensive artwork. This was her usual territory. She turned on the lights, set down her cleaning kit, and rolled up her sleeves. For a moment, she allowed herself to daydream of living in a place like this. No rusted faucets, no angry landlords, no expired coupons stuffed into a wallet. The corners of her mouth tugged into a wistful smile. Breaking the quiet, her friend and fellow cleaner, Mariam, appeared. She was a petite woman with quick hands and an even quicker wit. "You're here early," Mariam said, pushing a wheeled cart of cleaning supplies. April shrugged. "Needed the extra hours, Mr. Donovan's not exactly patient about the rent." Mariam clicked her tongue. "I get it. My own landlord is about as flexible as a steel beam." They shared a tired laugh. Working together brought a sense of camaraderie that helped dull the sting of polishing floors for people who never bothered to learn their names. With Mariam's help, the morning's chores flew by, dusting the chandeliers, vacuuming the plush rugs, wiping the massive windows that overlooked a meticulously landscaped garden. By mid-afternoon, the sun filtered through those spotless panes, lighting the place with a gentle glow. April paused at the window, glancing at the orchard beyond. Even from inside, she could smell the faint perfume of spring blossoms. The mansion, for all its grandeur, felt empty, like a stage set for a play that rarely saw actors. It made her curious about the man who owned it. Did he ever actually live here? Just then, Mariam popped her head into the room. "I'm headed out early. The manager said you're good to close up. Think you can handle the evening shift alone?" April offered a confident nod. "Sure thing." Alone in the still corridors, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The air felt charged, as if waiting for a storm. She tried to shrug it off, focusing instead on the last of her tasks, cleaning a small library near the back of the house. The hush in that room was almost sacred. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, filled with books in pristine condition. "Lucky man," she murmured, imagining what it would be like to pick any title and read, uninterrupted for hours. She carefully dusted the shelves, one by one. And as the clock ticked closer to evening, an uneasy anticipation coiled in her gut. She told herself she was just tired, that the real storm was her landlord's threats, but sometimes storms come in unexpected forms. Nightfall brought a quiet tension to the mansion. April's sneakers squeaked faintly on the polished floors as she gathered her belongings. She'd finished every chore on her list, triple-checking each room. Despite the near silence, her thoughts buzzed with countless worries. Rent deadlines, the cost of car repairs, and whether she might have to pick up yet another cleaning job. A single overhead light glowed in the main foyer, casting elongated shadows. April reached the front door and paused. Something felt off, like an unspoken presence pressed against her shoulders. "Relax," she muttered under her breath. "Don't start imagining ghosts." She spotted a small envelope resting on the side table by the entrance. Her name was scrawled in bold letters across the front. Curious, she opened it. It was a brief note from the estate manager. "Additional cleaning needed in the upstairs guest suite. Please handle first thing tomorrow," she sighed. More work, more hours, but also more pay. She tucked the note into her pocket, grateful for the chance to earn a bit extra. Stepping outside, the chill air snapped her back to reality. She walked to her car, inhaling the crisp evening breeze. Before she could open the driver's door, her phone vibrated. "Hello," she answered. Pressing the device to her ear, a tired male voice filled the line. "April, it's me, Eric." Her heart skipped a beat. Eric was her ex-boyfriend who'd left a year ago, chasing some half-baked dream of making it big in Los Angeles. She cleared her throat. "Why are you calling?" He hesitated. I was in town. Wanted to see if you were okay. I heard you were struggling with rent." April bristled. "I'm handling it," she replied curtly. "Thanks for asking," Eric sighed. "If you need anything, I don't." She cut him off. "I really have to go." She ended the call, hand trembling. Thoughts of Eric stirred a blend of anger and regret. She had loved him once, but he'd chosen his ambitions over their relationship. Shaking her head, she slid into the driver's seat. Some chapters in life were best left closed. The next morning arrived with the promise of a drizzling rain. April parked in her usual spot near the servants' entrance. The mansion loomed against a grey sky, looking even more imposing. She made her way upstairs to tackle the guest suite, as instructed. The corridor on the second floor felt eerily quiet. Opening the door, she blinked at the opulent space, a plush bed with velvet drapes, an ornate mirror, and thick carpeting that silenced her footsteps. A memory surfaced. A month ago, she'd overheard two staff members discussing the elusive Nolan Sanders. They spoke of him like a recluse, seldom home, always traveling, rumored to be heartbreakingly private after a messy public breakup. At the time, April had paid it no mind. But standing there now, tidying a room that seemed untouched for months, She felt a faint stirring of curiosity about this invisible millionaire. She flicked on a table lamp to get a better view of the dust swirling in the air. Then, methodically, she began to clean. Her phone buzzed again. It was Mariam, texting to say she'd be late. April rolled her eyes. "Typical," she murmured. At least it meant a little solitude to think. Just as she finished wiping down the vanity, thunder rumbled outside. The lights flickered once, then steadied. She glimpsed her reflection in the mirror. Tired eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun, clothes smudged with bleach stains. She sighed. If only she could catch a break, a miracle that could get her out of this cycle of scraping by. In the hallway, she noticed a partially open door that was usually locked. A brief wave of unease washed over her. Should she peek inside? Curiosity won. She nudged it gently. The door creaked, revealing a study lined with old maps and antique globes. Books lay scattered on a heavy wooden desk. She ventured inside, half expecting an alarm to go off. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her. Her heart hammered. Had Mariam arrived after all? She poked her head back into the corridor, but found it empty. She took a calming breath. For a moment, she could have sworn someone was there. The atmosphere felt charged, as though every molecule in the air bristled with a secret. She tried to shake off the feeling. After all, the staff insisted Mr. Sanders was still abroad. Returning to the study, she eyed a large photograph on the wall. It showed a younger Nolan, standing beside an older man who had the same sharp features, likely his father. They both looked proud, standing in front of the mansion's grand entrance. April leaned closer to read the plaque beneath it, but a sudden clash of thunder made her jump. The day wore on. She continued her tasks with mechanical diligence. But the sense of being watched lingered. By evening, she was once again the last one left. Rain tapped the windows, wind howled through the eaves. Despite her better judgment, she decided to double-check the corridors. Maybe she just needed to reassure herself that no intruders lurked around. As she wandered, April's mind flicked to her mounting worries. A possible eviction if she couldn't pay soon, the ache of loneliness gnawing at her spirit, and the nagging memory of Eric's phone call. She was so lost in thought that she barely noticed the faint light shining from a room at the far end of the hallway. She approached it with caution. Every instinct told her she might be crossing a line, but she couldn't help it. Her heart thudded in her chest, certain that something or someone was there. That pale beam of light led April to the last door on the right. It was slightly ajar, warm lamplight spilling into the dark hallway. She placed a trembling hand on the doorknob, pulse racing. Her mind conjured scenarios of burglars, or perhaps a ghost from the mansion's rumored history. But the staff never mentioned anything about break-ins, nor had she heard stories of hauntings. Still, her heart refused to calm. She pushed the door open. Inside was a modest room by this estate's standards. A small sofa, a few scattered books, and a glass of water on a side table. It looked lived in, a stark contrast to the rest of the house's pristine emptiness. Then she noticed a shadow move near the window. A tall figure stood there, back turned, speaking softly on a phone. Startled, she fumbled for her cleaning rag, like it might serve as a weapon. Her voice caught in her throat. The figure stepped away from the window, shoulders tense, apparently unaware of her presence. Her instincts kicked in. With her heart pounding, she backed out of the doorway and rushed down the hall. She needed to alert security, except she had no proof this person was an intruder. For all she knew, it was Mr. Sanders himself, though everyone insisted he was away. The staff hadn't mentioned any visitors, and the manager didn't say anything about guests. Fear twisted her thoughts. "Stay calm," she whispered, scanning her surroundings for something, anything, to defend herself. She spotted a tall decorative vase by a side table. No, that was too heavy. Then her gaze fell on a nearby bucket of water she'd used to mop the floors. A ridiculous idea formed in her mind, but panic overrode logic. She lifted the bucket, creeping back toward the lit room. If the person inside truly was a thief, maybe a shock of water would disorient them long enough for her to escape. Her heart hammered so loudly, she wondered if he could hear it. Mustering her courage, she pushed open the door with her foot and, in one swift motion, heaved the water toward the figure. "Hey!" a deep voice shouted in alarm. Time seemed to slow as the water arced through the air and doused him completely. The man spun around, sputtering, hair and expensive-looking shirt drenched. April realized, too late, that this was no petty burglar. His eyes were wide with outrage and confusion, and he held a cell phone in his dripping hand. He was older than she'd expected, late 30s perhaps, with dark hair and sharp features that mirrored the photograph she'd seen in the study. An icy wave of realization crashed over her. This had to be Nolan Sanders, the elusive owner, and she'd just soaked him like a stray cat. For a moment they both stood frozen, water dripping onto the hardwood floor. Then he spoke, voice low and brimming with shock. "What the hell is going on?" April's throat felt paralyzed. She stammered, I thought you were someone else." She didn't dare say a thief, though it was painfully obvious. Her face burned with humiliation. Nolan set his phone aside, brushing water from his face. "You're April, right? The cleaning staff?" She nodded, feeling small under his gaze. "Yes, Mr. Sanders, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were in the house." He blinked, regaining his composure. The anger that flared in his eyes softened slightly, replaced by weary annoyance. "I returned unexpectedly last night. Clearly, nobody informed you." She swallowed hard, feeling tears prick the back of her eyes. She was sure this spelled the end of her job, maybe even a lawsuit. Her mind spun with catastrophic outcomes, imagining the humiliating headlines: "Cleaner attacks, millionaire homeowner with bucket of water." Nolan took a measured breath. "You thought I was an intruder," April's voice cracked. "Well, the staff said you were out of the country. I heard noises. I was afraid." She trailed off, overwhelmed by shame. He ran a hand through his soaked hair, water flicking in all directions. Then, unexpectedly, a faint smile ghosted his lips. "That's quite the welcome home." Relief and mortification warred in her stomach. "I'm really sorry," she repeated, cheeks flushing. "I'll pay for any damages." "The floor," he held up a hand. "Don't worry about the floor. That's the least of my concerns right now." He retrieved a towel from a nearby closet, patting his face dry. "But next time, maybe a hello would suffice." She wanted to melt through the floor. "Yes, of course." Her voice was tiny. Should I leave?" Nolan regarded her for a long moment, as if weighing her question. He seemed oddly calm, considering the circumstances. "No, it's fine. This was just an accident. Let's chalk it up to poor communication." April nodded, clutching the empty bucket. I'll go get some towels for the floor. Again, Mr. Sanders, I'm sorry. It won't happen again." Before he could respond, she fled the room in a storm of embarrassment. Her legs trembled as she hurried down the corridor. Any hope she'd had of staying invisible was gone. She had soaked the man who paid her salary. That single moment would forever stand out as the pinnacle of her personal misfortune, or so she believed. In the safety of a linen closet, she pressed her forehead against a shelf, lungs struggling to fill with air. Even if he let her keep her job, this shame would haunt her for ages, and something else simmered beneath her panic. The intensity in his gaze, the faint humor that glimmered in his eyes once the shock wore off. She couldn't name the emotion that settled over her now. It felt bigger than mere relief, tinged with an electricity that made her heart pound for reasons beyond fear. She forced herself to calm down, collecting fresh towels. When she returned, Nolan was on the phone again. his tone brisk and irritated as he demanded updates from some business associate. He caught her eye and shook his head, as though to say, "We'll talk later." She quickly mopped up the water, cleaning the floor in mortified silence. Eventually, she crept out of the room, leaving him to his conversation. Every cell in her body was screaming at her to run and never return, but she needed this job, and after that humiliating fiasco, she would do anything to keep it. Little did she know, the ties they had just forged, though forged in the most awkward way possible, would set her life on a course she could never have predicted. By the next morning, rumors circulated among the mansion staff. Most had heard that April accidentally drenched Mr. Sanders, but the versions varied wildly. Some joked she'd saved him from a fire, others claimed she had a panic attack. April endured the teasing with burning cheeks, but no one seemed outright malicious. In fact, Mariam's laughter rang out when she heard the story. "Oh, April," she giggled, wiping a tear from her eye. "If you wanted to get his attention, there are simpler ways," April groaned. "Don't start. It was horrible. I can't believe he didn't fire me on the spot." Maybe he was too shocked. Mariam's laughter subsided. "But if he's letting it slide, maybe he's not as cold as people say." April shrugged, her stomach still in knots. She'd glimpsed more than just shock in Nolan's eyes. There was a depth there, something complicated, but she had no intention of analyzing it. Survival first, curiosity later. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Midway through her shift, she spotted Nolan in the hallway, conferring with the estate manager. He was dressed in a crisp, charcoal suit, hair neatly combed. No evidence remained of the watery incident. He nodded curtly to the manager, then turned to lock eyes with April. She froze in place. The manager was talking, but Nolan's gaze lingered on her before he gave a subtle, polite nod. Then he walked away. The interaction lasted only seconds, yet it felt charged with unspoken meaning. April exhaled shakily once he disappeared around the corner. She was relieved he hadn't come storming over with a pink slip, but the tension didn't dissipate. The memory of his drenched face still haunted her. Later that day, she found herself vacuuming the same corridor where their confrontation took place. Each time she looked at the door, her nerves flared. Finally, she decided to confide in Mariam. "I need to apologize again," April said, winding up the vacuum cord. "I need to do something formal. Maybe write a note or bake cookies. I'm not sure." "Cookies?" Mariam snorted. "You think he eats homemade cookies? The guy's a millionaire. He probably has a personal chef who uses ingredients I've never even heard of." April managed a half smile. "Yeah, you're right. Maybe just a face-to-face apology. Then..." She got her chance sooner than expected. Around lunchtime, she found Nolan alone in the large dining room. He was leaning over a tablet, scanning something with an air of annoyance. April gathered her courage and cleared her throat. He looked up. "April." Mr. Sanders," she began, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I wanted to say thank you for not firing me, and I'm sorry again for what happened." He studied her for a moment, then set aside the tablet. "Apology accepted, but let's make sure that doesn't become a regular occurrence." "Yes." She gave a nervous laugh. "Definitely not, I promise." She turned to leave, but he spoke again. "I won't be here long, just a few weeks. I have business to settle. But while I'm around, do you mind being assigned to the main house? I prefer consistency, and you're clearly thorough in your work." Her stomach fluttered at the compliment. He was asking her to remain close, essentially. It felt both an honor and a test. "Of course." "I'd be happy to," he nodded, returning his attention to the tablet. She left, heart thumping, half terrified she might spill water on him again. Yet a part of her was oddly excited to see more of this reclusive man, whose eyes seemed to hold entire stories behind them. That evening, Mariam cornered her. "He wants you as the primary cleaner in his personal quarters." "Wow, that's big news." April folded a stack of towels, avoiding eye contact. "It's just a job." "Nothing more." Mariam's grin was mischievous. "Sure it is, but be careful. Rumor has it that the last time Mr. Sanders stayed here, one of the staff tried to get close, romantically, and was dismissed. He guards his privacy like a fortress." April frowned. "I'm not trying to get close. I'm trying to keep my job." As the day wound down, April's thoughts swirled. She worried about crossing boundaries, especially since she was already under a spotlight. The fear of making another catastrophic mistake loomed large, but so did an undeniable spark of curiosity, even admiration. After clocking out, she sank into the driver's seat of her Honda, mind drifting to Nolan's guarded expression. He was a puzzle she had no real business trying to solve, yet she found herself wanting to know what weighed on him, why he seemed so lonely in a house full of luxuries. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Eric. She grimaced, ignoring it. She wasn't about to re-engage with past heartbreak, not when she had enough complications in the present. Still, the reminder unsettled her. Life had taught her that men with resources often had the power to hurt her worst. She couldn't afford another heartbreak or betrayal. Once home, April tried to relax. She made a modest dinner, macaroni and a canned pasta sauce, while thinking about the day's events. The memory of Nolan's faint smile lingered. She told herself that any interest she felt was purely human curiosity, nothing more. Tomorrow, she would show up, do her work, and go home. Simple as that. Yet as she curled up under a thin blanket that night, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that her life was on the verge of a shift she couldn't control. She thought of his eyes when they'd locked on hers, serious but not unkind. Then she shook off the thought with a sigh. Men like Nolan Sanders were out of her league in every way that mattered, and she was determined not to forget it. Somewhere in that silent apartment, her old phone blinked with Eric's unanswered messages. She'd deal with that later, or maybe never. For now, she needed rest. Morning dawned cool and overcast. April steeled herself for her new responsibilities. She parked in her usual spot and made her way to the main entrance. Willis, the security guard, greeted her with a playful wink. "Heard you gave the boss a free shower," he teased. April rolled her eyes, cheeks warming. "You too, Willis? Great." Inside, the estate manager, Mrs. Caldwell, handed April a detailed list of tasks focusing on Nolan's private living spaces, his bedroom, bathroom, and personal study. Mrs. Caldwell seemed polite but guarded, as though sizing April up. "Mr. Sanders asked for you specifically." "Don't disappoint," she said curtly. Her first stop was Nolan's bedroom. She knocked, waited, and only entered after hearing his muffled, "Come in." The room was spacious, yet surprisingly understated, warm earth tones, a simple king-sized bed, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a view of the gardens. Nolan sat by a small desk, reading. He looked up when she entered. "Morning," he said in a calm tone. "Good morning," she replied, trying to keep her composure. She set about gathering towels, changing sheets, and dusting surfaces. The hush between them felt thick. She could sense his gaze on her occasionally, but he said nothing. Finally, she gathered her courage to speak. "If I'm in your way, let me know," she offered, carefully fluffing a pillow. He closed his book. "You're fine. I'm used to working around people." Still, her nerves prickled. She finished quickly, then moved on to his bathroom. There, She found little personal clutter, just a toothbrush, a razor, and a half-used bottle of cologne that smelled faintly of cedar. She tried to ignore the pang of curiosity about his habits, focusing on scrubbing the pristine countertops. Half an hour later, she wrapped up, stepping back into the bedroom. Nolan wasn't at the desk anymore. She heard movement by the windows. Turning, she found him standing near the glass, staring out at the cloudy sky. His expression was distant, as though lost in memories. Without thinking, she paused. He sensed her hesitation. "Something on your mind?" She bit her lip. "I was just wondering. It must be peaceful out there. The gardens, I mean." He looked over, eyes guarded. "It can be. Peace is relative, though." She nodded, unsure how to respond. In her experience, the absence of noise didn't always mean the absence of turmoil. Deciding not to overstay, she inclined her head politely and left. Her heart pounded as she headed to the study next, trying to quell the flutter in her chest. She reminded herself, "This is just a job. Don't read into anything." The study was a different world from the rest of the mansion. Dark mahogany shelves, leather-bound books, the faint scent of old pages. She remembered rummaging here the day before, not realizing Nolan was just a hallway away. Now she methodically dusted each shelf, scanning titles on finance, architecture, and a surprising number of classic literature volumes. She was so absorbed that she barely registered Nolan entering. He cleared his throat, making her jump. "Sorry," he said softly. "Didn't mean to startle you." She exhaled a shaky laugh. "No, it's fine. I get jumpy sometimes." He walked to a large wooden chest in the corner, lifting the lid. Inside were old photographs, documents, and a few keepsakes. April tried to focus on her dusting, but curiosity tugged at her. She glimpsed a worn baseball glove on top, along with a stack of letters. Nolan picked up the glove, turning it over in his hands before setting it aside. Before she could stop herself, she spoke. "Did you play?" He blinked, then glanced at her. "Baseball? Yeah, in high school. Shortstop." He gave a faint smile. "I haven't touched that glove in years." April paused her work. "Why'd you keep it?" He shrugged, a distant look in his eyes. "Memories of simpler times, I guess." An unexpected sense of kinship bloomed in April's chest. She knew too well how memories of the past could be both comforting and painful. The conversation hung in the air, a fragile bridge between them. He closed the chest, effectively shutting down the moment. "I'll be heading out for meetings soon," he said, as if reverting to formality. "If you have any issues, Mrs. Caldwell can handle them." She nodded. Understood. He left with a polite nod, and she exhaled. That fleeting openness vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the professional distance of a wealthy employer. Still, she couldn't shake the notion that beneath his carefully constructed demeanor lay a thread of loneliness, much like her own. And for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, that realization unsettled her in the most curious way. By late afternoon, she finished her tasks. Stepping outside for a quick break, she spotted Nolan near the circular driveway, talking to a driver. The door of a sleek black car stood open. He handed a folder to the driver, then turned, catching sight of April. Their eyes met briefly before he climbed into the car and shut the door. A silent goodbye. She watched the vehicle glide away, feeling a subtle pang. At that moment, Mariam appeared, startling her. "Did you see that fancy ride?" Mariam teased. "Must be nice to be chauffeured everywhere." April forced a casual shrug. "Yeah, must be." The ache in her chest confused her. She had no logical reason to feel disappointed, yet she couldn't ignore the strange sense of connection that had flickered between them. She reminded herself that lines were drawn in bold marker between people like them. She was here to clean, he was here to live. Still, life had a way of redrawing lines without warning. That evening, she gathered her jacket from the staff room. She paused in front of the mirror, studying her reflection, a tired woman in her early 30s, hair tied back, wearing sensible sneakers. Her gaze flicked to a small bruise on her forearm, probably from bumping into a piece of furniture. She touched it lightly, thinking about how fragile everything seemed. Jobs, relationships, even one's sense of self. As she exited the mansion, she felt the first raindrops. A distant rumble of thunder reminded her of the night she'd drenched Nolan. She would always recall the shock on his face. But more than that, she'd remember the quick shift afterward, his refusal to lash out, his almost gentle acceptance of her apology. She wasn't sure what it all meant yet, but she suspected that moment had changed something in both of them. In the coming days, her life might slip into the same routine, or it might spiral into uncharted territory. Only time would tell. One thing was certain: she had crossed a threshold. And though she couldn't see the road ahead, she sensed a story unfolding, one that wouldn't be easy to walk away from. April returned to the mansion early the next day, determined to maintain a steady rhythm in her work. The moment she stepped inside, Mrs. Caldwell handed her a revised schedule, additional cleaning tasks in Mr. Sanders's personal areas, plus a note that he requested her help reorganizing the study. April's pulse quickened. She couldn't recall any employer taking such an interest in having her around, but she swallowed her nerves and forced a professional smile. She began in the bedroom, exchanging the linens with swift, measured efficiency. Nolan was absent, likely at yet another meeting. The lingering hush reminded her of how easily one could feel lonely in a house this large. She found herself thinking about him more than she wanted, wondering how a person with so much could appear so guarded. Around mid-morning, Mariam sidled up to April while she was vacuuming the upstairs corridor. "I hear the boss man has you reorganizing his precious books," Mariam teased. "He must really trust you." April gave a half smile, brushing back a stray lock of hair. "Either that, or he knows I won't run off with them," she joked. Then, more seriously, "Mariam, did you ever meet him before that bucket incident?" "Just once, in passing," Mariam said with a shrug. "He asked how my day was, then kept walking. He seemed polite but distant." That description lingered in April's mind. Polite but distant. She could see it. Moments of warmth flickered beneath his composed exterior, yet he never let them last. By noon, she was alone in the study, meticulously organizing shelves according to the color-coded system Mrs. Caldwell had scribbled out. She was standing on a short stepladder, reaching for a row of dusty tomes, when a voice startled her from behind. "Do you need help?" April nearly dropped the book in her hand. She turned to see Nolan in the doorway, tie loosened, jacket draped over his arm. She offered a flustered smile. "I'm fine, thanks. I've got a system." He nodded, stepping closer. "I can see that. I didn't mean to interrupt." She climbed down carefully, placing the book on a nearby table. "No interruption, just trying to figure out where everything goes." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nolan cleared his throat. "I wanted to ask you something. I've decided to host a small gathering here next weekend, a business networking event, and I'd like to hire a few extra hands for the evening. If you're interested in earning some overtime, I'd appreciate your help coordinating the setup." April blinked, surprised at the personal invitation. "Me? But I'm just—" "You're not just anything," he interrupted quietly. "You're organized, reliable, and this house already runs smoother when you're on duty. I'd rather work with someone I trust." Warmth spread through her chest at his direct praise. She nodded. "Sure, I'd be happy to assist." Inside, she was already tallying how much the extra pay might help with her overdue rent. Nolan gave a grateful dip of his head. "Good, Mrs." Caldwell will handle most of the details, but I'll expect you to coordinate with the caterers and keep track of the schedule." He paused, searching her expression. "I realize it's above your usual cleaning duties, so I'll make sure you're compensated fairly." She mustered a relaxed smile. "That's very generous. Thank you." A hint of a smile tugged at his lips. Then it settled. He glanced at the partially sorted books. "I'll leave you to it, unless you have any questions." Her heart hammered as she realized how close he stood. For a moment, she considered asking about his life, about the secrets in those boxes he kept in the corner. But she hesitated. "No questions right now," she said softly. Nolan looked as though he might say more, but instead, he stepped back. "All right, I'll let you finish up." He left the room with a polite nod, the air feeling strangely charged in his wake. April exhaled, touching her throat as if to steady her pulse. What was she doing? Allowing these small moments to get under her skin felt dangerous. She shook off the lingering tension and refocused on the shelves, aligning each book with careful precision. By late afternoon, she'd finished the reorganization. Her mind buzzed with equal parts excitement and worry. Coordinating a formal event for wealthy business people was far beyond her usual routine of mopping floors and dusting chandeliers. Yet the promise of overtime pay was a godsend. She couldn't ignore the relief it brought, imagining Mr. Donovan's reaction when she finally handed him the full rent. Before clocking out, she found Mrs. Caldwell to confirm details for the event. The older woman's tone was crisp but not unkind. "We'll have a walkthrough next Tuesday," she explained, scanning a clipboard. "Caterers arrive at 3, florists at 4, guests at 7 sharp. Mr. Sanders said you'll handle on-site supervision." April nodded, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Yes, that's the plan." "Then I'll give you direct contact with the vendors," Mrs. Caldwell replied. "We're expecting about 30 guests, mostly investors and associates. No extravagant decor, just refined elegance. Mr. Sanders prefers subtlety. Refined elegance. Subtlety." April glanced down at her worn sneakers and plain t-shirt. She wondered if she even knew how to orchestrate an event that screamed sophistication. But the thought of stepping outside her comfort zone stirred a strange excitement in her gut. Late that evening, while sitting in her car before heading home, April tapped the steering wheel anxiously. Eric's texts still sat unread on her phone, each beep reminding her of a chapter she didn't want to reopen. Instead, she stared at the mansion's silhouette one last time, remembering the quiet intensity in Nolan's eyes when he said he trusted her. It was almost enough to make her believe in herself. Almost starting the engine, April vowed she wouldn't let fear stand in her way. She'd tackle this event, and who knew? Maybe this would be the stepping stone to something better, even if it was just a stepping stone to peace of mind. Over the next few days, April's focus shifted from routine chores to event coordination. She spent mornings meeting vendors and afternoons double-checking inventories for linens, glassware, and decorations. In the midst of it all, she tried to maintain her usual cleaning schedule, which led to more interaction with Nolan than ever before. He'd pop into rooms to discuss flower arrangements or confirm the dinner menu, his manner polite but purposeful. One afternoon, she found him in the foyer, examining an arrangement of fresh lilies in a tall crystal vase. "These are too strong," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "I don't want anything overpowering when guests enter." April stepped closer, the soft fragrance curling around her. "I can ask the florist to switch them out, maybe hydrangeas or white roses." He looked at her thoughtfully. "That's a good idea. Roses might be too formal, though. Hydrangeas would bring a softer touch." She nodded, pulling out a small notepad to jot it down. "I'll handle it," she promised, slipping the notepad back into her pocket. "Anything else you're not happy with?" He hesitated. The lighting in the library might be too harsh. I'm planning a short presentation there, so maybe we can use warmer bulbs or table lamps. April found herself smiling at his attention to detail. I'll see what we can do. There was a moment of comfortable silence. Then Nolan tucked his hands into his pockets and gave her a thoughtful look. I appreciate your flexibility. These events can be stressful. She shifted on her feet. I'd imagine so. It's a lot of pressure, having all these big names under one roof. A flicker of tension crossed his features. Yes, well, let's just say some of my father's old associates will be here. They expect perfection. His voice tightened on that last word, as if perfection was both a goal and a burden. April didn't push for details. Something told her he had complicated feelings about his father's legacy. Instead, she offered a simple nod. We'll do our best. He seemed to appreciate her discretion, and with that unspoken bond, he returned to his study. April stood there for a moment, realizing she was starting to see cracks in Nolan's polished exterior. Beneath the measured politeness, there was vulnerability, a desire to prove something, perhaps, or to maintain a standard set long before he took ownership of this mansion. That evening, as April prepared to leave, she ran into Mariam by the main doors. Her friend wore a mischievous grin. You know, everyone's talking about how chummy you and Mr. Sanders have become. April groaned, rolling her eyes. Chummy? We're just working together on this event. That's it. Mariam held up her hands in mock surrender. Relax, I'm just repeating what I hear, but I have to admit, you do seem a bit brighter than usual. Heat rose in April's cheeks. She tried to laugh it off. My rent's nearly paid. That's reason enough to be cheerful. Her answer was only half true. Yes, the extra money eased her financial burden, but her quickened pulse at the thought of seeing Nolan each day had nothing to do with finances. She still reminded herself that this was purely professional, yet she couldn't deny that her heart felt lighter whenever his quiet gaze met hers. When she got home, she finally worked up the nerve to check Eric's messages. They were a jumble of apologies, vague pleas and hints at wanting to reconnect. Each new text made her stomach twist. She typed a single reply, I'm fine, please stop asking, then deleted it, deciding no response was better. That night, she dreamt of walking through the mansion's corridors, every door locked except one at the end of a long hallway. Inside that room, she found Nolan seated at a table strewn with papers. He looked up with a pained expression. But when she tried to approach, the door slammed shut. She awoke, heart pounding. The next morning, she arrived earlier than usual, hoping to finalize the lighting changes in the library. To her surprise, Nolan was already there, shifting lamps around and testing different bulbs himself. Couldn't sleep, she asked gently. He glanced over, offering a wry smile. I guess not. I wanted to see if I could solve this lighting issue on my own. April walked in, setting her bag down. The library's warm wood paneling glowed under the gentle lamps. You did a decent job, she said, twisting a bulb a notch tighter. Though you might have a future in interior design if this whole millionaire thing doesn't pan out. His low chuckle filled the quiet room. I'll keep that in mind. For a moment, he simply studied her face. Thank you, April. You've been handling these details seamlessly. I didn't realize how much I needed someone competent to help out. She felt her cheeks grow warm. I'm just doing what anyone would. He shook his head. Not everyone is as thorough as you. Then he inhaled sharply, as if catching himself oversharing. Sorry, I don't mean to intrude on your morning. I'll let you carry on. No need to apologize, she said, voice softer than intended. I'm glad to help. He gave a short nod and turned away, busying himself with the lamps once more. April lingered, her heart fluttering in a confusing rhythm. She realized it was more than just the extra wages making her come in early. She wanted to see him, to help ease whatever burdens kept him awake at night. As she left the library, she found herself whispering a silent question. What am I getting into? The answer felt as elusive as the faint rays of morning sunlight cresting the windows, hinting at a day that might hold more than she dared to expect. On the day of the event, the mansion hummed with activity from dawn until the moment guests arrived. Catering trucks lined the driveway, unloading crates of fine china and silverware. Florists dashed in and out with carefully balanced arrangements of soft-colored hydrangeas. April found herself directing traffic like a conductor, ensuring everything and everyone landed in the right place. Mariam helped set up tables in the foyer. "This is so fancy," she whispered, admiring the gold-rimmed plates. "How do you not break something by accident?" April laughed nervously, double-checking a centerpiece. "Don't jinx it. I'm stressed enough already." When evening fell, a subtle transformation took place. Gentle music played through hidden speakers, the lights in each corridor were dimmed to a warm glow, and flickering candles on polished tables created an elegant ambiance. April, dressed in a simple black dress, Mrs. Caldwell had insisted she wear, guided the final touches like a stage manager before opening night. Nolan arrived downstairs in a tailored suit, speaking quietly with a distinguished older man who seemed to command the room with a single glance. April guessed this must be one of his father's long-time associates. She couldn't catch their conversation, but she noticed the tension in Nolan's jaw, the way his eyes flickered with caution. "April," he called softly, beckoning her over. "Could you show Mr. Price to the seating area? He'll need a moment before the presentation." Mr. Price turned, flashing a polished smile that failed to mask a calculating gaze. "So, you're the assistant who's brought everything together?" he asked, voice dripping with a practiced charm. April forced a polite nod. "Just following orders, sir." "Right this way." She led him past a row of candlelit tables, aware of Nolan's watchful eyes behind her. Mr. Price surveyed the decor with an approving smirk, occasionally commenting on the old man's legacy. April gathered he was referring to Nolan's father, though she didn't dare pry. Once she'd settled Mr. Price, she hurried to check on the rest of the arriving guests. Women in sleek evening gowns glided through the foyer. Men in suits traded firm handshakes. Laughter, hushed conversations, and the clinking of champagne glasses filled the mansion. April managed to keep a calm facade, but inside, her heart pounded with the responsibility of ensuring nothing went wrong. Then, halfway through the night, a caterer rushed up to her. "We're short on wine glasses in the dining room," he hissed, eyes wide with panic. April's stomach lurched. She quickly scanned the staff in the vicinity. Mariam was busy directing servers, so April sprinted to the kitchen, rummaging through crates until she found a stash of extra glasses. Balancing them carefully, she wove through the crowd. On her way, she nearly collided with Mr. Price. He arched an eyebrow, stepping aside at the last second. "Watch your step, dear." "Sorry," she breathed, relieved that none of the glasses shattered. She hurried on, distributing them to the wide-eyed servers. By the time she finished, a thin sheen of sweat covered her brow. She took a moment in a quiet corner to catch her breath. A warm voice murmured behind her, "You're doing an excellent job." She spun around to find Nolan, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Oh, Mr. Sanders, I didn't see you there." "Nolan," he corrected gently, glancing at the tray of now empty glasses. "Relax for a second. Everything seems to be running smoothly thanks to you." She let out a shaky laugh. "I'm just glad I haven't dropped any plates yet." He chuckled, and for a moment they shared a quiet camaraderie. April's gaze flicked to his suit. How it fit him perfectly, the faint scent of his cologne, a subtle blend of cedar and spice. She felt an unexpected pang of admiration. Then she noticed the line of worry on his brow. "How are you holding up?" she ventured. He considered her question, then sighed. "I'm fine. It's just a lot of old ghosts in the room. People who knew my father, who expect me to fill his shoes. Not exactly relaxing." Gently, she touched his arm in a moment of empathy, then froze, realizing how intimate the gesture felt. "You're doing fine, too, for what it's worth." He glanced down at her hand, but didn't pull away. Instead, a grateful softness entered his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "That does mean something." An abrupt burst of laughter from the dining area broke the moment. Nolan straightened, clearing his throat. "I'd better circulate. Will you be around if I need you?" April nodded, returning to her professional stance. "Absolutely." With a lingering look, he returned to the throng of guests. She stood there a moment longer, heart fluttering like the candle flames around them. She couldn't ignore the tightening in her chest whenever she caught his gaze, nor the gentle undercurrent of kindness that passed between them. By night's end, the event wrapped up with a short toast from Nolan, thanking everyone for coming. The applause was polite, the conversation subdued yet harmonious. As guests trickled out, April saw Mr. Price give Nolan a firm handshake, leaning in to whisper something. Nolan's expression was unreadable, but he nodded. Then Mr. Price departed into the rainy darkness outside. With the last car pulling away, only the staff and a handful of caterers remained to tidy up. April felt exhaustion heavy in her bones. She was polishing a smudge off a table when Nolan approached her once more. "This evening went better than I expected," he said in a low voice, eyes searching hers. "I couldn't have done it without you." Her heart skipped. "I'm just relieved it's over." He gave a small smile, a rare sincerity shining through. "I'd like to thank you properly. Maybe dinner in town sometime." She blinked, stunned. For a split second, she thought she might have misheard. "Dinner, as in just the two of us?" His gaze wavered between confidence and vulnerability. "If you're willing." She opened her mouth to reply, but words failed. Torn between excitement and caution, she simply nodded. Yes. She'd figure the rest out later. The morning after the event, April woke with a mixture of exhilaration and anxiety coiling in her stomach. Dinner with Nolan Sanders. She still couldn't quite believe it. As she sipped her coffee in her tiny apartment, 1,000 questions buzzed in her mind. Was this just a polite gesture of gratitude or something more? By the time she arrived at the mansion, the place was already alive with post-event cleanup. Mariam and a few other staff members were carting away vases, packing up leftover supplies, and wiping down every surface. Nolan was nowhere in sight, which allowed April a moment to focus on her tasks without the added swirl of emotions his presence stirred. Around lunchtime, she found herself in the sprawling kitchen, munching on an apple while reviewing the cleaning checklist. That's when her phone buzzed loudly, displaying a number she recognized all too well. Eric. She hesitated, then picked up, bracing herself for whatever he had to say. "April, hey." Eric's voice sounded falsely light. "How've you been?" She exhaled. "I'm busy, Eric. What is it?" He paused. "I heard through a friend that you might be working at that big mansion, the one owned by Nolan Sanders." He let the words hang, waiting for a reaction. Her nerves prickled. "Why do you care?" "I was thinking," he began, voice shifting to a coaxing tone. "If you have connections there, maybe you could introduce me to some of his business associates. I'm trying to jumpstart a venture." April nearly dropped her phone in disbelief. Are you serious? That's the only reason you're calling me, after you vanished for a year? Eric sighed dramatically. Look, I'm just asking for a little help. You always were resourceful. She felt anger surge, hot and sharp. I'm not your stepping stone, Eric. Don't contact me again. She ended the call with trembling hands, biting her lip to hold back tears of frustration. Of course, he only cared about how she could benefit him. She sank onto a stool, heart pounding. You're not the same person you were before, she reminded herself, inhaling slowly to steady her nerves. She resolved to bury that conversation and not let it sabotage her day, especially not the dinner invitation that still danced at the edges of her mind. Later that afternoon, she was vacuuming the main foyer when she heard Nolan's voice behind her. Everything all right? She turned off the vacuum, forcing a smile. I'm fine, just dealing with personal calls. He offered a concerned look, but didn't pry. I wanted to confirm, are you free tomorrow evening? We could go somewhere in the city. Her stomach fluttered. Yes, I'm free. She hesitated, mind racing. But I should tell you. I'm not sure what your usual dining style is, but I'm more comfortable with something casual. She laughed awkwardly. I don't even own a formal gown. Nolan's lips quirked into a small grin. That's fine. Let's keep it low-key. There's a place I know by the waterfront that serves incredible seafood. How does that sound? Relief poured through her. That sounds perfect. He nodded, a certain warmth in his eyes. Then it's a date. He paused, seeming to realize the weight of that word. Or, an evening out, whichever you prefer. Her heart softened at his uncertainty. Let's call it dinner, she said gently, and see what happens. With a subtle smile, Nolan turned and walked away, leaving April to replay the exchange in her head a dozen times over. It's a date, her thoughts whispered. The rest of the day blurred by. April sensed the curious stares from Mariam and the others, but no one confronted her outright. She wasn't ready to answer their questions anyway. When she finally clocked out, she drove home in a haze, heart drumming with both excitement and a nagging dread. She remembered the stark differences in their worlds, his wealth, her precarious finances. How would she ever fit into his life, and did she even want to? She spent that night rummaging through her closet, eventually pulling out a simple blue dress she'd bought on clearance months ago. It wasn't designer, but it flattered her figure and felt comfortable. Good enough, she decided, carefully hanging it up for the next evening. The following day seemed to crawl. April worked methodically, double-checking the mansion's daily cleaning roster, her mind too occupied by the impending dinner to dwell on mundane tasks. By late afternoon, she was itching to get home and prepare. She was about to sign out when Nolan appeared near the staff exit, a faint flush on his cheeks as though he'd been rushing. I wanted to make sure, he began, catching his breath. Do you need a ride? I can send a car. April shook her head. I'll drive myself, thanks. I can meet you at the restaurant. He nodded, looking almost relieved. All right, it's called Waterfront Ivy. 7 o'clock? She agreed, noticing a flicker of nerves pass between them. Then she left, adrenaline sparking through her veins. The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and honking cars, each stop sign an eternity. Once inside her apartment, she flew into a whirlwind, a quick shower, a dab of makeup, and the blue dress. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, heart pounding. Maybe this is crazy, she thought, but I want to see where it leads. At 6:30, she slid behind the wheel of her beaten Honda, exhaling a calming breath. This wasn't a fairy tale. Nolan was just a man, and she was just a woman trying to make ends meet. Still, the spark between them felt real enough to risk stepping outside her comfort zone. As she turned onto the main road leading into the city, she allowed a tentative sense of hope to blossom in her chest. She didn't know if dinner would change anything, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had permission to explore something more than survival. Her phone buzzed. Mariam wishing her luck. April smiled, focusing on the darkening sky ahead. We'll see where the night takes me, she thought, pressing a little harder on the gas. The waterfront Ivy sat perched on a quiet stretch of Seattle's harbor, an elegant yet unpretentious restaurant with strings of soft lights leading to its entrance. When April arrived, she parked in a small public lot nearby, nerves fluttering in her stomach like restless birds. The evening air carried the tang of salt water, and the rhythmic lap of waves provided a soothing undercurrent to her anxiety. She hesitated at the door, half expecting a sudden flash of paparazzi or high society patrons turning to stare. But inside, she found a cozy atmosphere of flickering candles and gentle laughter. A courteous hostess greeted her with a smile. "Are you meeting someone?" "Yes," April said, cheeks warming. "Nolan Sanders." The hostess's face lit with recognition. "He's already seated. Follow me, please." She wove through the softly lit dining area, heart pounding. She spotted Nolan at a corner table by a large window overlooking the water. He stood as she approached, looking equal parts dashing and apprehensive in a dark blazer and open-collared shirt. The glow of the nearby candles cast warm shadows on his face. "You came," he said quietly, relief evident in his voice. April managed a small laugh. "Was there a chance I wouldn't?" He shrugged, pulling out her chair. "I wasn't entirely sure. I know I can be." "Intimidating." She smoothed her dress, sitting down. "Maybe a little. But I'm here, so let's see how it goes." He smiled, taking his seat again. For a moment, they both simply breathed, letting the soft clink of silverware and murmured conversation fill the space. A waiter arrived, presenting menus and describing the day's specials. April glanced at the elegant listings, suddenly aware of the price tags. She swallowed, determined not to let finances spoil the evening. Nolan caught her hesitation and touched her hand lightly. "My treat," he assured her, voice gentle. "Order whatever you like." She glanced up, meeting his gaze. "Thank you," she said softly, deciding on a simple seafood risotto. Nolan ordered grilled salmon, adding a bottle of white wine to share. Once the waiter left, April noticed Nolan studying her face with a certain intensity, as if he was seeing her for the first time outside the mansion's polished walls. "So," she began, trying to break the tension, "how does it feel to be out of your fortress for a night?" He chuckled. "A little strange, to be honest. I'm used to business dinners, formal events. Rarely do I get to just relax and have a normal conversation." She lifted an eyebrow. "Does this count as normal conversation?" He leaned forward, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "I hope so. So tell me, how did you end up working at my house? And clearly you're capable of much more than cleaning floors." She bristled slightly, but saw there was no insult intended. "I took on cleaning jobs after my previous office position downsized. I needed stable income, and these gigs pay better than you'd think, especially with overtime. Plus, flexible hours help when life is complicated." He nodded, sympathy in his gaze. "I understand. My own life took unexpected turns after my father passed. I inherited the business, the mansion, but also a legacy I never quite wanted." April softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. Was it recent?" He exhaled, swirling his wine. 2 years ago, but it feels recent. We weren't close. He had high expectations. Then he passed before I could prove anything to him. So here I am, managing a conglomerate I never asked for, trying to keep up appearances." His honesty pulled at her heart. "That must be exhausting." "It is," he admitted. "That's why I travel so often. Sometimes I need to escape the weight of it all." Their meals arrived, temporarily halting the conversation. April took a bite of her risotto, creamy, perfectly seasoned. She let out a contented sigh. Nolan smiled at her reaction. The quiet intimacy enveloped them for several minutes as they savored their food. Eventually, he set down his fork. "I'm curious about something else." He hesitated, as if debating whether to continue. "Why did you throw water on me that night?" She nearly choked on her risotto, cheeks burning at the memory. "I thought you were a burglar. No one told me you'd returned. It was dark, and I was already jumpy." A rumble of laughter escaped him, low and genuine. "I still can't believe that was our first real introduction." April joined in his laughter. "I felt awful. Still do. But maybe it broke the ice." He grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners, definitely more memorable than a handshake. After that, the conversation flowed more easily. They talked about favorite books, the best coffee spots in Seattle, and their mutual love of quiet mornings. April found herself opening up about her childhood, a humble upbringing in a small town, the struggles her family faced. Nolan listened intently, occasionally asking gentle questions. Outside, the sky darkened, and the reflection of city lights glimmered on the water. When they finished their meals, neither seemed in a rush to leave. Nolan ordered a second glass of wine for each of them, and April felt a gentle warmth spreading through her veins, not just from the alcohol, but from the sense of genuine connection. She watched him, noticing how the lines of stress on his face softened when he talked about simpler pleasures. He asked about her dreams, and she hesitated before admitting she once wanted to become a teacher, but life got in the way. He encouraged her softly, suggesting it might not be too late. Time slipped by until the waiter discreetly dropped off the bill. Nolan signed it without a second glance, then rose from his chair. "Shall we take a walk by the water before heading home?" April nodded, heart fluttering at the thought of extending the evening. They stepped outside into the cool night air. The gentle hush of waves and the distant glow of city lights wrapped them in a quiet intimacy. As they walked along the pier, their shoulders brushed, each contact sending a small electric thrill through April. Eventually, they stopped at the railing, looking out at the dark expanse of Puget Sound. The stars above seemed impossibly bright, scattered across the sky like shards of silver. Nolan slipped his hand into hers, tentative and warm. She let him, leaning against his shoulder with a contented sigh. "Thanks for tonight," she murmured, voice barely audible over the lap of water. He turned slightly, pressing his cheek to her hair. "Thank you for saying yes." In that moment, under the same stars, it felt like the distance between their worlds had shrunk, if only for one perfect night. And though neither dared to say what might come next, they both felt the quiet promise in the air, shining as brightly as the lights reflected on the surface of the water. April woke the next morning with a lingering sense of warmth, her mind still replaying the gentle press of Nolan's hand in hers by the water, but reality intruded swiftly as a series of texts from her landlord flashed across her phone. Mr. Donovan wanted final confirmation on her outstanding rent. She was nearly paid up, but not completely. She sighed, rolling out of bed to get ready for work. At the mansion, she dove back into her usual tasks. She hadn't expected to see Nolan right away, assuming he'd be sleeping in after their late night, but there he was, pacing the foyer in a tense phone call when she entered. "Yes, I'm fully aware," he muttered into the phone, brow furrowed. "But I need those reports by tomorrow if this deal is going to work." He paused, listening, then exhaled sharply. "Fine. Keep me updated." He noticed April at the edge of the room, offering a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. The warmth he'd shown at dinner was overshadowed by clear stress. Hanging up, he rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Everything okay?" she ventured softly. He forced a nod. slipping the phone into his pocket. Work issues. Merging a branch of the company with a new partner. I'm under a lot of pressure to prove myself. April stepped closer, keeping her voice low. If there's anything I can do... His eyes flickered with appreciation. I'll manage, but thank you. He touched her elbow lightly, then let go. I might be preoccupied the next few days. She forced a small smile. I understand. He nodded and strode away, leaving her with a sense of unease. Something about his demeanor felt heavier than usual, like a storm gathering at the horizon. She tried to shrug it off, focusing on her duties. Yet part of her wanted to find him later, to ask if dinner had changed things, or if it was simply the demands of his world pulling him back. Late that afternoon, April retreated to the staff kitchen for a break. Mariam joined her, offering a sympathetic look. You seem worried. Did you and Mr. Sanders have a fight? April shook her head, keeping her voice down. No fight, just tension. He's got a lot on his plate. Mariam raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Well, if you need a distraction, you might want to see what's going on out front. Confused, April followed Mariam to the main entrance. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she spotted a sleek black car idling near the fountain. Stepping outside, she recognized Eric leaning against the passenger door, arms folded, casual as if he belonged there. Her stomach lurched. She approached him, voice clipped. What are you doing here? Eric smirked, pushing off the car. He was dressed in a stylish jacket and jeans, clearly trying to appear confident. Just thought I'd drop by and say hi. Maybe check out the place. She folded her arms. You're not allowed here without permission. This is private property. He cocked his head. Word on the street is you're getting cozy with the big boss, Nolan Sanders. You two together now? Or do you just handle his personal chores in exchange for a paycheck? Anger flared in her chest. My personal life is none of your business. Eric shrugged, eyes sweeping over the mansion. You might be interested in a little proposition. I've got a startup idea, could be huge with the right investors. And guess who has easy access to some of the biggest wallets in town? April's voice trembled with rage. So this is why you keep calling. You want me to play middleman for your schemes. He lifted his palms. Don't be so dramatic. You know we were good once. Help me out and I'll keep quiet about our past. I'm sure the tabloids would love a story about a billionaire's new flame and her shady ex. April's heart pounded. That's blackmail. Call it what you want, Eric said, a smug smile twisting his lips. If you scratch my back, I scratch yours. We both come out winners. She glared at him, fists clenched. Leave now, or I'll call security. He shrugged. I'll go for now, but think about it. You have my number. Sliding into his car, he revved the engine and tore off, leaving her shaking on the driveway. Inside, Mariam rushed to her side. April. What was that about? She pressed her lips together, tears threatening. Eric wants me to arrange an introduction to Nolan's investors. He basically implied he'd drag my name through the mud if I don't. Mariam's eyes widened. That's horrible. You have to tell Mr. Sanders. April shook her head vehemently. No, I don't want him involved. He's already dealing with enough and I can't burden him with my messy past. But if Eric keeps coming around, I'll handle it, April insisted, though she had no idea how the rest of the day passed in a blur. She avoided Nolan, partly out of fear that he'd sense her turmoil. By evening, she managed to slip away quietly, driving home with knuckles white on the steering wheel. She couldn't let Eric ruin everything she'd built, especially not her fragile new connection with Nolan. That night, she lay awake in her cramped bedroom, replaying Eric's threat in her mind. She felt torn between letting Nolan in on the problem and protecting him from more stress. The possibility of gossip or scandal threatened to unravel her. But she resolved to keep this battle her own, for now. Somewhere outside, a car alarm blared, jolting her out of her thoughts. She turned on her side, staring at the faint glow of streetlights leaking through the curtains. "I'll find a way," she told herself, hoping she could. The storm was brewing, and she felt it tightening around her like a vice, but she wasn't ready to let it tear her life apart. The next morning, April arrived at the mansion, still rattled by Eric's sudden appearance. She ducked into the laundry room, hoping to organize linens and clear her head. But not long after she started, Mrs. Caldwell found her, a worried crease between her brows. "April, Mr. Sanders asked to see you in the study. Now." Her heart skipped. "Is everything okay?" Mrs. Caldwell's expression remained neutral. "He didn't say, he just seemed tense." Adjusting her uniform, April followed the winding corridor to Nolan's private study. She found him behind a large wooden desk, rapping his knuckles against its surface, eyes stormy. The door clicked shut behind her, and she felt the tension radiating from him. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice level. He motioned for her to sit, but remained standing, arms crossed. "Who was that man yesterday, outside my house?" Her throat went dry, so he knows. "His name is Eric. He's someone from my past." "I saw him on the security feed," Nolan said grimly. "He wasn't on the authorized list." "What did he want?" April twisted her hands in her lap, deciding which details to reveal. "He's pushing me to introduce him to some of your associates. He's involved in a business scheme, and he thinks I have an inside track." Nolan's eyes darkened. "He's using you." It wasn't a question. She nodded, unable to hold his gaze. "Yes." His silence pressed on her. Then he took a slow breath. "You should have told me." She forced herself to look up. "I didn't want to involve you. You have enough on your plate, and this is my problem." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "April, when someone shows up at my property, harassing a member of my staff, He paused, exhaling sharply. "I have a right to know." Emotion caught in her chest. She heard the unspoken words he nearly said. "Someone I care about." A flicker of warmth passed through her, but it was overtaken by guilt. "I'm sorry. I just didn't want to make this into a bigger issue than it already is." He let out a frustrated sigh. "You don't have to protect me from your troubles. If he's threatening you, he hasn't threatened me physically," she clarified. "He's just using pressure tactics. He wants to leverage my connection to you." Nolan's jaw clenched. "Do you need me to call my lawyers, the police? I can shut this down." She shook her head, dread curling in her stomach. "If he sees you step in, it might escalate. He could go public with lies or half-truths. It could become a media mess for you." His gaze flicked away, the tension in his posture intensifying. "My public image is already under scrutiny. If this man stirs up rumors, it could jeopardize the merger I've been working on." April bit her lip. This is exactly what she feared. "I can handle Eric," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "I'll make it clear he won't get anything from me." Nolan studied her with a mix of worry and resolve. "Promise you'll tell me if he contacts you again." She nodded slowly. "I promise." At that, he eased, shoulders dropping slightly. For a moment, she thought he might come around the desk to hold her, or at least offer some reassurance. But he stayed rooted in place, guarded. "All right," he finally said. "Go finish your tasks for the day. We'll figure this out." She rose, her heart heavy. As she reached the door, he spoke again, voice softer. "April." She turned, meeting his gaze. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this, and I'm sorry if I seemed harsh." She mustered a small smile. "It's okay. Thank you for caring." He looked like he wanted to say more, but the words stayed locked in his throat. She slipped out, heart twisting with a complex mix of relief and disappointment. The conversation felt incomplete, laden with unspoken feelings they both were too tense to name. The rest of the day moved in slow motion. April cleaned rooms on autopilot, barely registering her surroundings. When Mariam asked if things were okay, April offered a vague shrug. She didn't want to drag her friend deeper into this mess. Late in the afternoon, she stepped into the library to dust the shelves. The memory of reorganizing them with Nolan flashed in her mind, his quiet presence, the subtle chemistry crackling between them. Now, a leaden worry settled in her chest. Would Eric's interference ruin everything? She hated feeling vulnerable, hated that her past could rear up and sabotage her newfound hopes. Glancing out the window, she noticed storm clouds rolling across the Seattle skyline, matching the turmoil in her thoughts. She finished her cleaning, left the mansion without seeing Nolan again, and drove home under the first spatters of rain. The weather mirrored her mood perfectly. Unsettled, fraught, unpredictable. That night, she paced her small apartment, phone in hand, debating whether to text Nolan. A part of her yearned to check on him, to offer reassurance that Eric wouldn't succeed in causing chaos. But she sensed Nolan needed space. He wore stress like a second skin these days. She ended up tossing her phone onto the couch, leaning against the window to watch the rain slide down the glass. With each drop, she felt her own defenses eroding. She'd fought so hard to keep her past behind her, only for it to surge forward at the worst possible time. Maybe the ground beneath her and Nolan had never been stable. Maybe they'd built something fragile on faulty foundations. At some point in the darkness, she whispered a silent plea for calm. But outside, thunder rumbled, as though mocking her wish. It seemed this storm was only just beginning. The next few days passed in a tense fog. April tried to maintain a professional demeanor, yet worry gnawed at her from the inside. Eric's texts had gone silent, and the absence of his harassment somehow felt more ominous than its presence. Meanwhile, Nolan buried himself in meetings and phone calls, chasing final approvals for his merger. Their brief exchanges were polite yet distant, as if both were afraid of stepping onto treacherous, emotional ground. One afternoon, Mariam invited April to grab a quick coffee after work. Grateful for a break, April agreed. They wound up at a small cafe a few blocks from the mansion, settling into wooden chairs beside a fogged-up window. So, Mariam began, stirring sugar into her latte. "Are you gonna tell me what's going on with you and Nolan?" "I barely see you two talk anymore," April sighed, tracing the rim of her cup with a finger. "We talk. It's just complicated. He's busy, and I have personal stuff dragging me down. We're in this weird holding pattern." "You two had that magical evening at the waterfront," Mariam pressed gently. "He was practically glowing the next day. Everyone noticed. Then this Eric drama happened." April grimaced at the mention of his name. "Yes, and I don't know when he might pop back up." Mariam's eyes flickered with sympathy. "Does Nolan know the extent of what Eric's capable of?" "Not really," April admitted. "I told him enough to be cautious, but not the ugly details. I don't want to scare him off or derail his merger. He's already under so much pressure." Mariam sighed. "You can't handle this alone forever. Eric's trouble, and you're clearly miserable." April squeezed her friend's hand in silent thanks, but said nothing more. She didn't have a plan, only a persistent hope that Eric would lose interest and disappear. After they finished their coffees, April returned to her car, mind swirling. She wanted to text Nolan something comforting or casual, but found no words that felt right. Ultimately, she drove home in silence, feeling a heavy distance between them. The following morning, Mrs. Caldwell assigned April to polish the banisters and grand staircase in the main hall. Tedious work, but at least it kept her hands busy. Halfway through, Nolan emerged from his office, phone pressed to his ear. "Fine, let them file the paperwork," he said, tone clipped. "Yes, Mr. Price can sign off once I review the documents. No more delays." He ended the call, running a hand through his hair in frustration. April paused her polishing, summoning the courage to speak. "Everything okay?" He looked at her, tension etched around his eyes. "It will be, once this merger is finalized. I'm dealing with an old family friend, Mr. Price. Well, he was more of my father's friend. He's making last-minute demands." She noticed the faint tremor in his hand. "Sounds stressful." "That's an understatement," he muttered, then managed a small smile. "But I appreciate you asking," April swallowed. "I'm here if you need anything, even just to talk." His gaze softened. Stepping closer, he lowered his voice. "I'm sorry I've been distant. When I get overwhelmed, I shut people out." She forced a reassuring smile. "I understand. You don't owe me an apology." He looked as if he wanted to say more, but footsteps in the corridor caused him to straighten. An assistant hurried by with a stack of folders, nodding respectfully at Nolan. He cleared his throat and stepped back, re-wearing his business composure. "We'll talk soon," he promised, then returned to his office. Though the exchange was brief, April felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could find their way back to that easy warmth they'd shared. Yet as days wore on, the calm never came. Eric remained silent, a threat lurking just outside her line of sight. And Nolan seemed to be racing against time, finalizing deals, scheduling more business dinners, and avoiding fiascos that could sabotage his plans. One evening, close to quitting time, April gathered her cleaning supplies from a hallway cabinet when she heard voices emanating from the study. The door was partly open. She recognized Mr. Price's booming tone, the same man who'd attended Nolan's previous gathering. Curiosity piqued. She hesitated, not wanting to eavesdrop but too tempted to ignore the tension. "It's a simple matter," Mr. Price was saying. "Your father would have signed off without this much fuss." "My father isn't here," Nolan replied, voice tight, "and I won't sign until I'm certain the terms are fair." Mr. Price gave a sardonic laugh. "You're more stubborn than he was. Watch your pride, boy. It can topple empires." April winced at the condescending edge in Mr. Price's voice. She heard Nolan's sharp intake of breath. "I'm not my father. I'm trying to do right by his legacy, but on my terms." "Legacy?" Mr. Price scoffed. "You're a caretaker of his empire, nothing more. Remember that before you start claiming ownership." April's pulse pounded at the harsh words. Before she could retreat, the door swung open, and Mr. Price stepped out, nearly colliding with her. He narrowed his eyes in recognition. "You again," he said, voice dripping with disdain. She lowered her gaze, clutching the cleaning supplies. "Excuse me," he sniffed, adjusting his expensive watch. "Does Nolan let all his staff linger outside private conversations?" "I'm leaving now," she muttered, stepping aside. He brushed past her, then paused. "You're the woman from that night, the one assisting with the event." He eyed her uniform. "Looks like you're still polishing floors, after all." April bit back a retort, forced a polite smile, and hurried away. Once she was out of sight, she let out a shaky breath. What is Nolan dealing with? She'd known Mr. Price was important, but the man's cruelty was startling. If he spoke to Nolan that way, perhaps the pressure was even worse than she realized. Her sympathy for Nolan swelled, but so did her own fears. She sensed the mansion's atmosphere shifting, cracks forming in the walls Nolan had so carefully constructed around his father's legacy and his own emotions. Between doubt and desire, we're dancing on a fragile wire, she thought, picturing how one gust of Eric's manipulations or Mr. Price's demands could send them all tumbling. 2 days later, as a grey dawn broke over Seattle, April's phone erupted with frantic texts from Mariam. Come quickly, something's wrong at the mansion. Throwing on her clothes, April raced out the door, adrenaline pumping at the implied urgency. She arrived to find the security gate open and Willis, the guard, directing employees inside with a grim expression. A group of staff huddled in the foyer, whispering anxiously. Mariam spotted April and hurried over, eyes wide. "There was a break-in last night," Mariam exclaimed. "Well, not exactly. The alarm didn't trigger. But some files in Mr. Sanders's office are missing, and a window was found broken." April's heart dropped. "Is he all right?" "He's fine, just furious. The police are in the study now." Without waiting for more details, April navigated the swirling crowd to find Nolan. He stood near his desk, shoulders stiff, speaking with two uniformed officers. Shards of glass glittered by a broken window. The entire room felt ransacked, drawers pulled open, documents strewn across the floor. Nolan noticed her and motioned her over. His face was pale with anger and worry. "April, do you know if anyone suspicious has been around lately? Maybe after hours?" She swallowed hard, Eric's face flashing through her mind. Could he have done this? But she didn't want to accuse him without proof. "I'm not sure," she said carefully. "Yesterday was normal. I left around 6. Willis locked up as usual. One of the officers, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s, cleared his throat. "We'll need a list of potential suspects. Anyone with a grudge, a motive, former employees or visitors." Nolan nodded grimly. "I'll provide whatever you need." He turned to April, voice quieter. "Important files are gone. Merger documents, personal letters. Whoever did this knew exactly what to take." Her stomach twisted. If Eric was responsible, this was far more serious than blackmail. She touched Nolan's arm gently. "I'm sorry. I'll help however I can." He gave her a grateful, if distracted, glance. Then the police continued their questions, pressing him for details. April stepped back, scanning the chaos. A disquieting possibility gnawed at her. Maybe Eric had discovered something in those papers that could boost his scheme or sabotage Nolan. As the day wore on, tension gripped the mansion. The staff moved quietly, cleaning up shattered glass and rummaged items. Nolan barricaded himself in the study, trying to salvage what remained of his records. Mr. Price arrived in a swirl of icy frustration, berating Nolan for his carelessness. April overheard them arguing in the hallway. "This fiasco puts our entire deal in jeopardy," Mr. Price spat. "Investors hate instability." "Don't you realize that?" Nolan's composure slipped. "I didn't invite a break-in, Price. You act as if I wanted this to happen." Mr. Price glowered. "Your father would never have let such a security lapse occur. I'm warning you, fix this before it unravels our agreements." He stormed off, ignoring April as she flattened herself against the wall to avoid being trampled. She sighed, shaking her head. Nolan was under siege from all directions, and she felt powerless to help. Gathering her courage, she knocked softly on the study door after Mr. Price left. Nolan's voice invited her in. He looked up from a mess of folders, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "You don't have to be in here," he murmured. She took a careful step forward. "I wanted to check on you. This is a lot." He scrubbed a hand down his face. "You think—" His tone was edged with bitterness, but he quickly softened. "Sorry, I'm just my father's old letters, personal notes about the business. They're gone. Whoever did this was thorough. The police think it might be an inside job, or someone with inside knowledge." April's throat tightened. "You're thinking about Eric, aren't you?" Nolan's expression darkened. "Yes, I haven't ruled him out. He shows up here once, then days later, my office is ransacked." He paused, searching her eyes. "Are you sure you're telling me everything?" She swallowed. "I told you all I know. He threatened me to get access to your investors, but I didn't help him, I swear." He exhaled, tension easing slightly from his face. "I believe you, But if he's desperate, who knows what he'll try? Pushing the folders aside, he reached for her hand. April, I can't stand the thought of you being caught in his crossfire. She nodded, heart aching for him. I'll be careful. His grip tightened. We'll be careful. He let out a ragged breath, then rose abruptly, pacing the room. I can't afford to let this destroy everything. My father's empire, this merger, it's all on the line. April watched him, her emotions churning. Nolan, maybe it's time to step back, to think about what you really want. The price of upholding your father's legacy, is it worth all this pain? He stopped in mid-step, eyes flicking to hers, conflict etched on his features. I don't know, he admitted, but I've come too far to let it collapse now. Silence enveloped them, thick with unspoken fears. April's mind drifted to the closeness they'd shared, how it felt in those unguarded moments. Now, everything hung by a thread, threatened by external forces and old ghosts that refused to rest. After a moment, Nolan spoke again, voice softer. Tonight, I want you to go home early. Stay safe. If Eric contacts you, call me immediately. No more secrets. She nodded. All right. He moved closer, reaching out. For a heartbeat, April thought he might embrace her, but the moment passed, and he simply let his hand linger near hers. She sensed his turmoil, the desire warring with caution. Then he turned away, focusing on the chaos of his desk once more. She left quietly, tears burning behind her eyes. Everything felt like it was rolling toward a breaking point. The fortress that was the Sanders mansion seemed on the verge of collapse, no matter how fiercely Nolan tried to brace it. The police investigation yielded few leads. Security footage offered nothing conclusive, and no one on staff reported suspicious behavior. Tension mounted each day, culminating in a critical investor meeting set for Friday evening. Nolan hoped to salvage confidence in the merger by reassuring stakeholders that the break-in wouldn't compromise the business. April spent the entire Friday assisting Mrs. Caldwell with last-minute preparations. She wore a tidy blouse and skirt instead of her usual cleaning attire, ready to help direct any logistical needs. By the time the investors arrived, a small circle of suit-clad individuals, the mansion's atmosphere hummed with nervous energy. In the main living area, Nolan circulated among the guests, forcing polite smiles. Mr. Price was there too, hovering like a vulture in a tailored suit. April watched from a discreet corner, stepping in only when needed to guide servers or handle minor requests. All seemed to be going smoothly until a sudden commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. April hurried over, heart pounding. There stood Eric, leaning casually against the doorframe, wearing a confident grin that made her blood run cold. Several guests turned in confusion. Mr. Price arched an eyebrow, eyeing Eric's casual attire with disdain. April rushed forward, voice hushed and urgent. You can't be here. Eric smirked, speaking louder than necessary. I'm here to see Nolan Sanders. Got a business proposal to discuss. Murmurs rippled through the group. Nolan pushed past the guests, eyes blazing. What the hell are you doing here? Eric held his hands up in mock surrender. Relax, man. I'm just trying to pitch an opportunity. Seems your father's old files might interest a few folks here, too. He tapped his jacket pocket with a sly wink. Nolan's jaw tightened. You're trespassing. Get out, or I'll call the police. Eric shrugged, scanning the stunned faces of the investors. Go ahead. But maybe they'd like to hear about the documents I found. Some interesting deals your father never disclosed publicly. Could be big news. A ripple of alarm crossed Mr. Price's face, and the investors exchanged worried glances. Nolan's voice shook with rage. You broke into my study. Eric shrugged, feigning innocence. I merely acquired what you refused to share. Let's just say your father had complicated financial arrangements. Some might call them questionable. Investors might call them scandalous. The room erupted in hushed gasps and frantic questions. Mr. Price tried to usher the investors to another area, but curiosity held them in place, eyes darting between Nolan and Eric. April's heart hammered. This was worse than she ever imagined. Eric planned to publicly humiliate Nolan, leveraging stolen information for personal gain. Nolan stepped forward, fists clenched. April grabbed his arm, trying to calm him. "He wants a scene," she whispered. "Don't give it to him." "Too late," Eric crowed. "It's quite a scene already." One of the investors, an older woman with silver hair, spoke up. "Is this true, Nolan? Were there undisclosed liabilities left behind by your father?" Nolan's face paled. "I'm not aware of any. This man is trying to exploit half-truths for profit." Mr. Price cut in, voice tight with desperation. "We need confirmation that the father's finances are clean. Otherwise, we can't proceed with the merger. This is a serious breach of trust." Panic flared in Nolan's eyes. April saw his carefully constructed facade fracturing under the weight of Eric's ambush. She stepped between them, turning on Eric. "How dare you barge in here, humiliating Nolan in front of his associates? You're doing this for money." Eric scoffed. "You know me, April. I always find a way to land on top." She trembled with fury. "You're pathetic," he smirked, then returned his gaze to Nolan. "Let's talk terms. I'll hand over all the documents, everything that could tarnish your father's name, if you introduce me to your investors as a potential partner. I have business ideas. I just need a foot in the door." A stunned silence fell. The audacity of the demand was staggering. Mr. Price whispered urgently to an investor, the two stepping aside for a hushed conference. Nolan looked at Eric, expression a mix of horror and contempt. Finally, Nolan spoke, voice trembling. "You think I'd let you blackmail me in my own home, sabotage everything my father built?" He glanced at April, anguish in his eyes. Then he inhaled, turning to the investors. "If you choose to believe this intruder's lies, you're free to back out, but I refuse to be extorted." Mr. Price exploded. "Refuse? This scandal will rock the foundation of your entire enterprise. For God's sake, Nolan, do something." Eric folded his arms, looking amused. "Tick-tock, Mr. Sanders." In that moment, April felt the air leave the room. She saw Nolan on the brink of losing all he'd worked for, the merger teetering, the investors recoiling in distrust. She wanted to help, to fix it, but the situation was careening out of control. Mr. Price turned to the investors, raising his voice. "We can't proceed under these conditions. The father's debts, these alleged hidden files, are unacceptable risks." He leveled a final glare at Nolan. "You've failed to maintain your father's legacy. I withdraw my participation in the merger." A chorus of uneasy agreement followed as the other investors began murmuring about stepping away. Eric watched with a smug grin, stepping back from the door. "I'll see myself out," he said lightly. "Let me know if you change your mind about my offer." He disappeared into the night, leaving ruin in his wake. One by one, the investors filed out, muttering apologies and regrets. Mr. Price was the last to go, fixing Nolan with a look of utter disappointment. Then the door closed behind him and silence blanketed the foyer. April reached for Nolan's hand, but he pulled away, eyes brimming with anger and despair. "It's over," he whispered, voice hollow. "He destroyed everything." She had no words as she watched him stagger back, the weight of loss crushing him. Outside, wind rattled the windows as if the storm had finally broken through. Everything they'd built, the trust, the fragile closeness, lay in shattered pieces around them, and in that moment it felt like there was no going back. In the aftermath of Eric's ambush, an oppressive silence gripped the mansion. The lavish rooms, once brimming with possibility, felt hollow. The staff tiptoed through corridors, afraid to draw attention to the shattered dreams that lingered like ghosts. Nolan locked himself in his office for days, refusing visitors. Even Mrs. Caldwell spoke in hushed tones, her usual brisk efficiency dimmed by uncertainty. April stood by the library window one morning, gazing at the drizzle outside. The Seattle sky matched the pallor of her mood, grey, tired and bleak. She ached to reach Nolan, to offer comfort, but he'd grown distant again. His failure to secure the merger weighed on him, and she saw the toll in the dark circles under his eyes, the haunted stare he wore when he thought no one was looking. Mariam found April there, arms crossed over her chest, brow furrowed. "He's punishing himself," Mariam said softly. "Blames himself for trusting the wrong people," April sighed. "He's also angry with me, whether he admits it or not. Eric is my past, and that past walked in here and wrecked everything." Mariam touched her shoulder. "Eric did this, not you. You tried to warn Nolan, he just didn't see it coming." But April knew it wasn't that simple. Their connection had opened them both to vulnerability. If only she'd been stronger, more proactive, maybe Eric wouldn't have had the chance to sabotage Nolan's life. Guilt gnawed at her. Late that afternoon, she finally mustered the courage to knock on Nolan's office door. When he answered, his voice sounded rough, as if he'd gone too long without sleep. She pushed inside to find him hunched over his desk. Papers lay crumpled, scattered with half-finished notes. He looked up, expression guarded. "April," he said, voice flat. "I'm busy." She approached, taking in the slump of his shoulders. "You can't go on like this. You haven't been eating, you've barely slept." He stood abruptly, eyes flashing. "Don't tell me how to handle my own crisis." The sharpness stung, but she refused to retreat. "I'm worried about you, we all are." He dragged a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "I appreciate your concern, but there's nothing to be done." The merger collapsed. Price withdrew support. The other investors followed. "My father's name is in question, and Eric holds documents that could make the scandal even worse if he goes public." She felt a pang of helpless anger. "So you're just going to let him win?" Nolan's face twisted in bitterness. "He's already won. Don't you see? Everything my father left me, everything I've tried to build, is precarious at best. We're hemorrhaging partnerships and losing trust in the market." April moved closer, her voice soft. "There has to be a way to fight back. You have resources, lawyers, connections." A hollow laugh escaped him. "To do what? Sue Eric? Even if I drag him through courts, the damage is done. The rumor alone is enough to scare everyone away." She reached out, tentatively resting a hand on his forearm. "Nolan, you're not alone in this. Let me help." He froze at her touch, a swirl of conflict in his eyes. Then, in a moment of raw honesty, he whispered, "Everything I've ever done has been measured against my father. I kept thinking if I just succeeded enough, if I just performed well enough, I'd prove I deserved to inherit his empire. Now it's all slipping through my fingers." Her chest tightened, hearing the depth of his insecurity. She wanted to pull him into an embrace, but he turned away, shoulders rigid. "I can't ask you to shoulder my failures," he said quietly. "There's nothing left to fix." She hesitated. "Is that how you see us? A failure?" He squeezed his eyes shut. "I see us as impossible." His voice trembled. "Look what your past has done to my future. Look at the pain my father's legacy has inflicted on you. Do we really have a path forward?" A surge of hurt rose in her throat, but she forced it down. "If you're saying this is the end, then tell me plainly." His silence answered. She felt tears gather, hot and stinging, but she refused to break in front of him. With a shaky breath, she turned and left, shutting the door behind her. In the hallway, her composure cracked. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. It felt like every fragile hope she'd clung to was crumbling under the weight of regret and mistrust. She rushed outside into the drizzle, tears mixing with rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. The gate guard called after her, but she slipped into her car without replying, hands shaking as she clutched the steering wheel. Driving away from the mansion, she felt like she was leaving behind not just a workplace, but a dream she had dared to believe in. The city lights blurred through raindrops on the windshield, each flicker echoing the shards of her heart. Nolan had closed himself off, and maybe she couldn't blame him. The two of them were stuck in a storm that refused to pass. Back in her tiny apartment, she stood in the dim glow of her bedside lamp, phone in hand, fighting the urge to call him. She feared the silence on the other end might confirm her worst suspicions, that the connection they'd built was truly over, drowned by the unstoppable tide of scandal and loss. Instead, she sank onto the edge of the bed, letting the tears fall freely. This was the darkest corner of heartbreak she'd known in years, an ache that pulsed with every breath. With trembling fingers, she turned off the light and curled into herself. In the darkness, doubt whispered, sometimes love isn't enough to conquer the storms, and for now she had no answer to quiet that voice. In the days following that agonizing confrontation, the mansion's corridors felt unnervingly quiet. April arrived each morning to fulfill her cleaning duties, strictly professional, no extra tasks. Mrs. Caldwell handed her a reduced schedule. Rumors circulated that Nolan planned to trim expenses and staff, given the merger's collapse and the storm of negative press. Every now and then, April spotted Nolan from a distance, pacing through the halls with a phone pressed to his ear or conferring with legal advisors in hushed tones. He no longer sought her out, no longer paused for quiet conversation. She, in turn, kept her head down, performing her tasks with a numb efficiency. On one such morning, Mariam cornered her near the laundry room. "Hey, you can't keep living like this," she chided gently, eyes scanning April's pale face. "You look like you haven't slept in days." April shrugged. Sleep doesn't come easily when every dream is a replay of how everything fell apart. Mariam's expression wavered between sympathy and frustration. "Have you talked to Nolan? Even just to check on him?" She shook her head, swallowing the lump in her throat. "He's made it clear he doesn't want me involved." "He's hurting," Mariam insisted. "That's not the same as not wanting you. I've seen how he looks at you when you're not watching." April forced a hollow laugh. "Maybe before Eric wrecked his life. Now all he sees is the damage." Mariam's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, sighed. "I have to go handle something in the West Wing." Promise you'll at least take care of yourself." "I'll try," April whispered, watching her friend dash off. Finishing her work, April retreated to a seldom-used lounge at the far end of the mansion, seeking a quiet moment. To her surprise, she found Nolan there, staring vacantly at an unlit fireplace. A half-empty glass of amber liquid rested on a side table. She hesitated at the threshold, unsure whether to approach or slip away. He sensed her presence, turning his head slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, the lines on his face etched deeper with exhaustion. "April," he said, as if tasting the weight of her name. She swallowed, stepping inside. Should I go?" He didn't answer immediately, gaze flicking to the glass in his hand. "You can stay," he murmured finally. "I was just trying to remember a time this house felt alive. Maybe when my mother was here. She loved lighting the fireplace on cold evenings, turning it into a gathering place." April approached cautiously, arms folded protectively. "I never knew your mother was a part of this house." "She wasn't, for long. She passed when I was a teenager," he said, voice cracking ever so slightly. "But for a while, she filled these rooms with music and laughter. It hasn't felt the same since." April's heart clenched. She remembered how lonely the mansion had seemed even before everything collapsed. "I'm sorry," she offered, feeling the words were woefully inadequate. Nolan nodded, swirling the drink. "I used to think if I made this place successful, if I upheld my father's reputation, maybe I'd recapture a piece of what it once was. But now I see how foolish that was. You can't resurrect the past." Silence enveloped them. April's eyes stung with tears she fought to hold back. "No, you can't," she agreed softly. "But you can build something new, something that's yours, not your father's." He laughed bitterly. "Something new, after all that's happened. Investors have fled. Mr. Price is out for blood. My father's name is tarnished. And Eric, God knows what else he has in store." She moved closer, voice trembling with emotion. "Don't let Eric or your father's memory define you. You're more than your family legacy. And you can do more than cling to a broken dream." He looked at her then, eyes heavy with regret. "I'm sorry I blamed you. In my anger, I pushed you away. But every time I look at you, I remember how much I lost, and how close I came to finding something real." Tears blurred her vision. "Nolan," she breathed, not trusting herself to say more. He rose from the chair, swaying slightly. She realized he might be tipsy or simply exhausted beyond measure. "Let me see you home," he said, though the tone sounded more like a question than an offer. She hesitated. There was so much pain between them now, yet beneath it she still sensed the quiet spark that had drawn them together. "All right," she managed, voice unsteady. They walked side by side through the corridor, bypassing the staff exit. Outside, the evening sky lay bleak and gray. Nolan insisted on retrieving his car and driving her. April bit her lip, worried about his condition, but he seemed steady enough once they got going. The drive was silent, broken only by the purr of the engine. When they reached her apartment complex, he parked at the curb. She could feel the weight of unsaid words filling the car's interior. "Thank you," she said quietly, hand on the door handle. He closed his eyes, a pained expression crossing his face. "I don't know how to fix any of this, April." She fought the impulse to lean over and take his hand. "Just take it one step at a time. If you need me, I'm here." His throat worked as he swallowed. "I'm not sure I deserve that, but thank you." He reached up, gently brushing a stray tear from her cheek. Then he lowered his hand, letting the silence linger between them. Unable to bear the ache any longer, she slipped out of the car, murmuring a goodbye. The door clicked shut, and he pulled away slowly, leaving her standing on the curb as dusk settled. The echo of his headlights flitted across the cracked concrete, then vanished. April pressed a palm to her chest, inhaling the cool evening air. "He's hurting so much," she thought. "We both are." And yet a faint ember of hope glowed inside her, hope that maybe, through the rubble of shattered dreams and broken promises, something new might still rise. But before that could happen, they'd have to confront the past that refused to die. The next morning arrived with a soft pink light painting the Seattle skyline. For the first time in days, there was a hint of sun breaking through the cloud cover. April clung to that fragile brightness as she dressed and headed for the mansion, determined to face whatever lay ahead with renewed resolve. On her way, she stopped by a local coffee shop. She'd formed a small ritual, ordering 2 cups, one black, one with a splash of cream, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she'd find the courage to hand the second cup to Nolan in a gesture of goodwill. Even if he brushed it off, she wanted to remind him he wasn't alone. However, upon arriving at the mansion, she found the foyer buzzing with anxious staff. Mrs. Caldwell intercepted her, eyes wide. "We have a situation. A reporter from the Seattle Tribune is here, asking questions about Mr. Sanders and the break-in." April's stomach twisted. "Where's Nolan?" "In his office. Preparing to meet them, Mrs. Caldwell replied. He might need your help. The reporter wants a staff perspective, some human angle. You're the only one who's had extended contact with him. April grimaced at the thought of going on record about Nolan's private affairs. But she also knew letting the reporter roam unchecked could result in twisted narratives. With a nod, she hurried to Nolan's office, carefully balancing the cups of coffee. He sat at his desk, scanning notes. Dark circles still framed his eyes, but he exuded a forced calm. When he saw April, he blinked in surprise. "Morning." "Brought coffee," she said softly, placing a cup before him. "Not sure if you've eaten." He paused, gratitude flickering across his face. "Thank you." Taking a sip, he exhaled slowly. "I need you in the room when this reporter talks to me." She specifically asked if she could speak with a trusted employee. April's pulse raced at the idea of stepping into the spotlight. "You think that's wise?" He leaned back. "She'll run her piece either way. If we refuse, it'll look like we're hiding something. If we cooperate, maybe we can guide the narrative." "I trust you to be discreet." Her heart fluttered at his words. "I trust you. Do I trust myself?" she wondered, but she nodded. "All right, I'll do my best." Minutes later, a woman in her mid-30s entered the office. She wore sharp attire and carried a notebook. "Mr. Sanders, thank you for meeting me. I'm Dana Caldwell from the Seattle Tribune." She turned to April, offering a professional smile. "And you must be—" April swallowed. "April Mitchell." The reporter dipped her head. "Pleasure. I understand you've worked closely with Mr. Sanders. May I ask you a few questions after I speak with him?" Nolan gave a curt nod. "We'll answer what we can." Dana launched into her inquiries about the break-in, the missing documents, and the merger's abrupt collapse. Nolan, choosing his words carefully, explained that the investigation was ongoing and that rumors of hidden debts were unverified. "The only real truth here is that my father's estate was more complex than people assumed," he concluded. "We're working through it with our legal team." Dana scribbled notes, glancing occasionally at April. "And Miss Mitchell, can you confirm Mr. Sanders's demeanor around the staff in these tense times?" April forced a calm tone. "He's professional and conscientious." "The break-in shook everyone, but we're focused on keeping things running smoothly." She refused to add personal details, keenly aware that the reporter might sniff out a deeper connection. Dana arched an eyebrow. "So there's no truth to rumors that Mr. Sanders is on the verge of dismantling his operations or selling off the property?" Nolan's jaw tightened. "No, I have no intention of selling the mansion or my company. My goal is to stabilize and move forward." "So you're not giving up?" Dana pressed, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Absolutely not," Nolan replied, voice firm. April found her tension easing. This was the most resolute she'd seen him in days. As Dana wrapped up her questions, she offered a neutral smile. "Thank you for your time. We'll aim to present a balanced view. If there's anything else you'd like the public to know, I'm listening." Nolan paused, gaze flicking to April. Then he said, "Let them know I'm still here, and I intend to honor the legacy my family left, despite the setbacks." The reporter jotted down his final statement. After exchanging courtesies, she departed. The moment the door closed, Nolan sagged in his chair, rubbing his temples. Well, that was nerve-wracking. April smiled tentatively. "You handled it well. You sounded determined." He looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe I needed someone else to hear me say it to believe it myself." A small spark of relief lit in her chest. "So you're not giving up?" He shook his head. "I was close to it. But something tells me I need to fight for what's left, for what can still be built." She dared to hope that included them. "I'm glad," she said softly. He took another sip of the coffee she'd brought him. "Thank you for this, and for standing by me despite everything." His eyes softened. "I owe you an apology. I accused you of bringing Eric into my world, when really he forced his way in. I was angry at him, at myself, at my father. It was easier to push you away than face my own failings." She moved closer, tears prickling. "I understand. Honestly, I did blame myself for a while. But I see now, Eric's actions were his alone. All we can do is decide how to respond." Nolan exhaled, setting the cup down. "Then let's respond by finding a path forward, if that's still what you want." She blinked away tears. "It is." A faint smile lifted the corners of his mouth. "Good. Because I'm going to need you if we're going to rebuild. This might be the hardest thing I've ever done. But I can't do it alone." Warmth bloomed in her chest, a sense of possibility edging out the darkness. "We'll figure it out," she promised, "one step at a time." They sat in companionable silence, the tension of past days slowly unraveling. Outside, the sun broke fully from behind the clouds, sending shafts of light through the office window. Neither missed the symbolism in that gentle glow, the promise that no storm lasts forever. With renewed determination, Nolan put his legal team on Eric's trail. Over the next few days, they managed to confirm that Eric had indeed stolen documents from the Sanders mansion. However, proving the break-in might still be an uphill battle. Most of the evidence was circumstantial. Eric's sudden knowledge of private transactions, his threats, and the partial alignment of footprints found near the broken window. Despite these hurdles, Nolan refused to back down. He spent long hours with his attorneys, drafting a lawsuit for theft and defamation. April saw him transform from a man battered by loss into a force fueled by righteous anger. She admired this shift, though she worried about Eric's potential retaliation. One afternoon, she and Nolan holed up in the study, sorting through files the investigators had retrieved. They catalogued what remained, searching for anything that might contradict Eric's claims of hidden debts. April's gaze wandered across old photographs pinned to a corkboard. Nolan's father, smiling with various business partners. Decades of sealed deals captured in still frames. A rap on the door interrupted their work. Mrs. Caldwell appeared, expression tense. "Mr. Sanders, your visitor has arrived." Nolan arched an eyebrow. "Visitor?" "Eric," she clarified with thinly veiled distaste. "He insists he has information you'll want to hear." April's stomach dropped. "He's here." "How did he get past security?" "He's waiting in the foyer. Security's ready to escort him out if you say the word, but he's claiming a negotiation might be possible." Nolan went rigid, face clouding. "That man's nerve is astounding." He glanced at April. "Do you think we should hear him out?" She frowned, remembering all the damage Eric had wrought. "It might be worth listening, just to see what he's up to." Nolan's lips pressed into a hard line. "All right. Let's do this." He turned to Mrs. Caldwell. "Show him into the sitting room. We'll be there shortly." When Eric stepped into the sitting room, April and Nolan found him examining a framed painting on the wall, posture annoyingly casual. Eric wore a fitted suit, hair slicked back as if he'd just left a high-end salon. He flashed a triumphant grin when he saw them. "Your security's intense," he quipped, straightening his lapel. "But I appreciate you letting me in." Nolan's tone was ice. "Make it quick." Eric spread his hands. "I've heard you're building a legal case. This could get ugly for both of us, so I'm here to propose a solution." "A solution," April repeated, forcing steel into her voice. "You ransacked the office, humiliated Nolan in front of his investors, and torpedoed his merger. Now you want to negotiate." Eric feigned a wounded look. Come on, I did what I had to. Business is cutthroat, but I'm not unreasonable. I'll return all the documents and sign a confidentiality agreement for a price. Nolan's eyes narrowed. What price? Eric stepped forward, hands in his pockets. I want two things. First, a sizable settlement, enough to fund my own venture. Second, an introduction to some of your remaining business contacts. If we play this right, nobody has to know the details of our little agreement. April's blood boiled at the audacity. You think you deserve a payoff for committing a crime? Eric shrugged dismissively. If you don't want to pay, that's fine. We can battle it out in court. I may lose, or maybe the negative headlines will be enough to bury any chance of you recovering from this. Either way, I've got nothing to lose. Nolan took a measured breath, clearly trying to rein in his temper. Let me be clear. I will not reward theft and blackmail. If you have an ounce of self-preservation, you'll hand over those documents and vanish. Eric's grin sharpened. That's your final word. Nolan stepped closer, voice trembling with anger. Final word. For a moment, tension crackled in the air, thick enough to suffocate. Eric's eyes flicked to April, a mocking glint in his gaze. So you're giving up your best chance at a quick fix, just to save your pride? Isn't that right, April? You know better than anyone how stubborn he can be. April stiffened, a flood of memories flashing through her mind. Eric's false promises, their painful breakup, the blackmail that led them here. She stared him down. I'd rather watch you face the full consequences of your actions than see Nolan stoop to your level. Eric's eyes hardened, but he kept his composure. Then I guess we're done. Enjoy the legal battle. I'll make sure the tabloids stay interested. He spun on his heel, headed for the door. Nolan didn't move, fists clenched at his sides. After Eric left, the hush that fell was deafening. April released a shaky breath. He's calling your bluff. He thinks you'll cave eventually. Nolan pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling a slow, steady breath. He's threatening to drag this out indefinitely, but I won't let him win, even if it means risking everything. A swirl of worry and admiration stirred in April's chest. She feared the toll a drawn-out battle might take on Nolan, on them both. Yet she couldn't deny her respect for his integrity. She touched his shoulder lightly. We'll do whatever it takes to expose him. He reached up, covering her hand with his. We will, he agreed. And if there's any justice left in this world, people like Eric don't triumph forever. She squeezed his hand, wishing she could share his certainty, but a whisper of doubt gnawed at her. Eric had proven he'd go to any length for profit and revenge, and while Nolan's moral stand was admirable, it also left him more vulnerable than ever. Still, as she gazed into his eyes, she resolved to stand beside him, come what may. In that moment, a fierce determination sparked between them, an unspoken vow that they would fight for truth, for dignity, and for the glimmer of connection they'd found in the midst of chaos. The next few weeks tested their resolve like never before. Legal paperwork piled high, phone calls demanded urgent attention, and the strain on Nolan's finances grew as he funneled money into attorney fees and damage control. Despite the tension, a sense of unity settled between him and April. Each small victory, like retrieving partial computer backups of the stolen files, felt like a lifeline. Early one morning, April arrived to find the mansion oddly bustling. Contractors moved in and out of the foyer, carrying rolls of carpet and painting equipment. She caught Mariam by the arm, bemused. "What's going on?" Mariam grinned. "Nolan's renovating some of the unused rooms, turning them into co-working spaces for local startups. Something about breathing new life into the place." April blinked. "He never mentioned that to me. I overheard Mrs. Caldwell talking to the foreman. Guess it's a new plan to generate income and public goodwill while the lawsuit simmers." A flicker of excitement lit in April's chest. So he's forging ahead, after all. She made her way to Nolan's office, finding him reviewing blueprints with a contractor. When the man stepped out, Nolan acknowledged her with a tired but genuine smile. "You're transforming the mansion?" she asked, unable to hide her awe. He shrugged, a ghost of pride in his eyes. "Parts of it, yes. Why let these grand rooms collect dust when they can serve a purpose? Maybe local entrepreneurs can rent workspaces, host events. It helps the community and might recast our public image." Her heart swelled at his ingenuity. "That's brilliant." He offered a hint of a grin. "I had good motivation to think outside the box." His gaze lingered, and a gentle warmth passed between them. After a moment, she cleared her throat. "Have you heard any news on the lawsuit?" His smile faded. "Eric's been dodging official summons. My lawyers are strategizing, but it looks like a stalemate for now." April exhaled. "I'm sorry. I know this is draining." Nolan reached out, curling his fingers around hers. "We'll survive, and in the meantime, I'm done letting fear dictate my choices." She squeezed his hand, remembering how paralyzed he once seemed. Now, despite everything, he was pushing forward. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. He squeezed back, and for a moment the rest of the chaos faded away. As the afternoon progressed, April helped direct workers in clearing a storage room for renovation. The bustle kept her mind focused, although she remained acutely aware of the precarious future. In quiet moments, she pondered how easily life could shift from despair to hope. Maybe they really could rebuild. Toward the day's end, April stepped outside for a breath of fresh air and found Nolan in the courtyard, peering at the neglected garden. Once lavish, it now bore overgrown shrubs and wilting flower beds. A pang of nostalgia hit her. She recalled how meticulously kept it used to be, back when the staff believed a bright future was certain. "You planning to remodel this area too?" she teased lightly. He glanced over, offering a rueful smile. "Why not? I'm thinking of planting a community garden. Invite volunteers to cultivate it, maybe donate produce to local shelters." April's eyes glowed at the idea. "That would be amazing." He turned to face her, hands in his pockets. "I realized for so long I've obsessed over preserving my father's legacy. But what if I build something that reflects who I am rather than who he was?" Her heart clenched with admiration. "That sounds like a beautiful new chapter," he nodded, scanning the overgrown greenery. "Part of me wishes my parents could see it, what this place might become. Maybe they'd understand I'm not rejecting them, just evolving." She stepped closer. "I think your mother, at least, would love to see these gardens thriving again. And your father, well, maybe he'd come around once he realized you're achieving success in your own way." He reached for her hand, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "April, there's something I've been meaning to ask. After all this, do you see yourself staying here as more than just an employee? I want you to have a real role, if you'd be willing. Project manager, event coordinator, whatever title fits." "I trust your instincts." A surge of emotion welled in her chest. She recalled her dream of being more than her circumstances allowed, of finding a life beyond endless cleaning shifts. "You'd trust me with that?" He smiled gently. "I already do. I've seen how you handle vendors, staff, unexpected disasters, even me at my worst." She laughed softly, tears pricking her eyes. "In that case, yes, I'd be honored." His expression brightened, relief and gratitude mingling. "Then let's rebuild this place, our way." They turned back to the tangled garden, and for a moment, April imagined it bursting with new blossoms, vibrant colors, and visiting neighbors stopping by to take in the beauty. In the distance, She could almost hear laughter echoing through the halls, feel the hum of renewed energy. A buzzing from her phone jolted her back. Glancing at the screen, she recognized her landlord's number. She stepped aside to answer, bracing herself for more talk of overdue payments. Instead, Mr. Donovan sounded almost cheerful. "April, I just wanted to confirm your balance is fully paid. I received the last check. Everything's in order." A wave of relief washed over her. She thanked him and hung up. "One less weight on my shoulders," she thought. Turning back to Nolan, she found him watching her curiously. She smiled, voice trembling with quiet joy. "Rent's finally sorted. I'm free of that burden." He laughed, pulling her into a swift, impulsive hug. "That's incredible news." She leaned against him, inhaling the faint scent of his cologne. Even as they stood in a neglected courtyard, overshadowed by looming challenges, she felt a surge of hope she hadn't known in a long time. They were creating something new, together. Maybe it wasn't guaranteed to succeed, but at least they weren't trapped by old shadows anymore. The sun dipped behind the mansion's eaves, casting elongated silhouettes across the cracked pathways. April turned her face upward, letting the last rays of daylight warm her skin. Beneath the emerging twilight, she and Nolan stood hand in hand on the cusp of tomorrow. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. April stood in the newly converted co-working space, formerly one of the mansion's grand sitting rooms, admiring the transformation. Where once polished furniture stood collecting dust, rows of modern desks and ergonomic chairs now invited collaboration. Soft lighting brightened the high ceilings, and a large mural of Seattle's skyline graced the far wall. The energy in the air felt charged with possibility. She'd taken on the title of project coordinator, guiding contractors and scheduling local entrepreneurs eager to rent a desk in the prestigious Sanders estate. Though the legal storm with Eric hovered in the background, a small community was sprouting here, hope in the midst of turmoil. Nolan appeared in the doorway, slipping his phone into his pocket. A faint line of worry still creased his brow, but he offered her a tired smile. "How's it looking?" he asked, stepping in to survey the room. "Like a dream finally taking shape," she replied, then lowered her voice. "Any news on Eric?" He shook his head. "Still evading the lawsuit, but my lawyers think they're close to pinning down his location. He can't dodge forever." April exhaled, scanning the energetic hum of the new tenants unpacking laptops and supplies. "I just hope this doesn't escalate. Every time I see a stranger walking in, I half expect it to be Eric pulling another stunt." Nolan placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "We'll be ready for him. Whatever he tries, I won't let him dismantle what we're building." His words fueled her courage. She recalled the heartbreak he'd suffered, the shame she'd felt at bringing Eric into his life, even if unintentionally. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder, forging ahead. A cheerful laugh echoed across the room. Mariam, who'd volunteered to help with an open house event, waved them over. "Come on, you two. We're about to do a little welcome speech for the new entrepreneurs." Nolan exchanged a glance with April, then followed Mariam to the front of the room. April watched as he took center stage, exuding a calm confidence. The past weeks had honed his resolve. He looked every bit the leader, yet approachable and genuine. "Welcome, everyone," he began, voice clear. "I'm Nolan Sanders, and this is the start of a new chapter for the mansion. We want these spaces to be more than offices. We hope they'll inspire community, innovation, and growth. Make yourselves at home." Polite applause followed, and a few excited cheers. April beamed with pride. She remembered the first time she'd walked these halls, feeling like an outsider with a mop in hand. Now, she was helping shape the future of this place. As the open house continued, April circulated with a clipboard, gathering feedback. Some participants suggested a shared kitchen, others asked about after-hours events. She noted each idea, her mind already buzzing with possibilities. Occasionally, she felt Nolan's eyes on her, warm, steady, silently appreciative. When the last visitor filtered out, the sun was setting behind the mansion. April and Nolan found themselves alone, tidying up stray cups and leftover brochures. The empty co-working room glowed in the amber light, the hush offering a moment of reflection. She turned to him, heart fluttering at the proximity. "You did great today. Everyone seems inspired." He studied her face, then spoke softly. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. Sometimes I think about how we started. You, a bucket of water, me caught off guard." She laughed, cheeks warming. "Talk about an awkward beginning." He smiled, a gentle expression that reached his eyes. "I think that moment changed my life more than I realized. Maybe I needed that shock to wake me up from my own loneliness." Emotions swelled in her chest. Slowly, she reached for his hand. "I'm glad I was the one to deliver it then." They stood like that for a quiet beat, hands entwined, the mansion's vastness enfolding them. Outside, a breeze rustled the newly planted hedges in the courtyard. April closed her eyes, soaking in the sense of stability they'd fought so hard to rebuild. Suddenly, a commotion at the entrance shattered the calm. Mariam came rushing in, breathless. "Nolan! April! You need to see this." Alarmed, they followed her out to the foyer, where Willis, the security guard, stood with two grim-faced police officers. One of the officers recognized Nolan and gave a curt nod. "We have a development in your case, Mr. Sanders. Eric Carlisle has been apprehended downtown." A jolt of adrenaline shot through April. Apprehended? How? He was pulled over for a minor traffic violation. When the patrol ran his ID, the outstanding warrant showed up. "He's in custody now." Nolan's breath caught. "So he can't run anymore?" "That's correct," the officer confirmed. "He'll be detained until arraignment. We'll need you to confirm details of the stolen documents, but the case is moving forward." Relief, fear, and a sudden burst of hope all collided in April's chest. She found herself clutching Nolan's arm for support. "Eric is caught," she thought, the words ringing in her mind like a bell of liberation. Mariam's eyes flicked from the police to April. "This is good news, right? He can't hurt you anymore." April nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, it is." One of the officers eyed Nolan. "We'll be in touch. For now, we suggest you begin finalizing your lawsuit. This should expedite the process." When the police departed, the foyer fell silent. Willis let out a low whistle. "Never a dull moment around here, huh?" Nolan managed a shaky laugh. "No, I suppose not." April closed her eyes, her pulse roaring in her ears. This felt like the break they needed, but the specter of facing Eric in court still loomed. She glanced at Nolan, and his expression softened. He reached out, weaving his fingers between hers. "We'll handle this," he murmured. "Together." She squeezed his hand, allowing a tremulous smile. "Together," she echoed, voice thick with emotion. At last, it seemed the shadows that haunted them had a chance to be dispelled, for good. The tension in the courthouse was palpable as April and Nolan made their way through the marble hallways. Men and women in suits bustled past, clutching files and murmuring in low voices. It was the pre-trial hearing for Eric Carlisle, and though this wasn't the full trial, it was a pivotal step. April clung to her purse, feeling her heart pound with each echoing footstep. Nolan, beside her, projected calm determination, though she sensed the roil of nerves beneath the surface. The stolen documents, the defamation, and the break-in allegations would all be laid out here to see if the case would proceed to a full trial. Mariam had come for moral support, waiting in the back of the courtroom. She gave April a thumbs up, mouthing, "You got this," as they took their seats. Before the judge entered, Eric was led in, handcuffed, flanked by two officers. He wore a rumpled grey suit, hair disheveled. Gone was the smug air of arrogance, replaced by a nervous tension that clashed with his usual self-confidence. Yet he still managed to flash a cold stare at April, making her shiver. The gavel struck once, and the hearing commenced. Eric's defense lawyer argued that the theft charges were exaggerated, that Eric had obtained the documents through personal connections. Nolan's attorneys countered, presenting evidence of forced entry in the mansion and security footage tying Eric to the premises. Sitting in the witness stand, April felt her stomach churn under the scrutiny of Eric's gaze. She recounted the day he confronted her outside the mansion, how he demanded an introduction to Nolan's investors. She explained his threats, how he showed up uninvited to sabotage Nolan's merger meeting, and the uneasy timeline of the break-in. The defense tried to poke holes in her testimony, suggesting she was exaggerating or that her past relationship with Eric clouded her judgment. April's voice quavered only once, but she steeled herself with a fierce resolve, locking eyes with Nolan for courage. Nolan himself took the stand next, detailing the stolen business documents and describing the chaos unleashed by Eric's extortion. While the defense lawyer attempted to paint Nolan as an overly ambitious heir struggling to uphold a failing empire, Nolan kept his composure. He calmly explained his father's estate, the external partnerships, and how Eric's meddling derailed legitimate deals. By midday, the hearing wrapped. The judge would take time to deliberate on whether the case warranted a trial. Outside the courtroom, reporters hovered with microphones and cameras, shouting questions about the scandal, the break-in, and the uncertain financial state of Sanders Enterprises. Nolan placed a protective arm around April's shoulders as they pushed through the throng, ignoring the barrage of flashbulbs. Mariam, trailing behind, snapped at a particularly aggressive photographer. "Back off, show some respect." They finally spilled onto the courthouse steps, breathing in the fresh air. April's legs felt wobbly, relief and anxiety battling inside her. "That was intense," she murmured, leaning against Nolan for support. He nodded, exhaling shakily. "You were amazing in there. I know how hard that was." She managed a small smile. "You too. I'm proud of you for staying so composed." Mariam joined them, scanning the swirling mass of onlookers. "Let's get out of here before the reporters corner you again," Nolan agreed, leading them toward a waiting car at the curb. Once inside, he sank into the seat, running a hand through his hair. "I guess all we can do is wait for the judge's decision. If they move forward, Eric will face a full trial." April clasped his hand. "And if they don't," he swallowed, eyes clouding, "let's just hope it doesn't come to that." They drove back to the mansion in near silence. Upon arrival, Mrs. Caldwell informed them that calls from local news stations were flooding in, requesting interviews. Nolan instructed her to issue a prepared statement only, no further comments. That evening, April retreated to her modest office, the newly repurposed library corner, to catch up on scheduling tasks for the co-working space. She found it impossible to concentrate. Every few minutes, her thoughts drifted to the courtroom, Eric's defiant stare, the judge's impassive face, the tension in Nolan's voice. Eventually, Nolan appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Long day," he said softly. She nodded, pushing aside a stack of papers. "I just hope the judge sees through Eric's lies." He stepped forward, hesitating. Then, with a quiet exhale, he laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No matter the outcome, I wanted you to know how grateful I am. If you hadn't stood up there and told the truth, I'm not sure I'd have the strength to keep fighting." Her chest tightened at the sincerity in his voice. She turned in her chair, looking up at him with a soft smile. "We fight together, remember?" his lips curved in a faint grin. Yes, together. They lingered in that hush for a moment, the weight of the day slowly easing. Outside, dusk painted the sky in pale violets, a reminder that even after the harsh glare of the courtroom, night could bring calm. Though the battle was far from over, they'd taken a crucial step, and in the midst of uncertainty, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. A week after the pre-trial hearing, the news broke. The judge had ruled that there was sufficient evidence for a full trial. Eric would face charges of burglary, theft, and attempted extortion. April felt a wave of relief so profound she almost cried upon reading the official notice. She found Nolan in the co-working space, sharing the update with a group of supportive entrepreneurs who cheered at the news. Things moved quickly after that. Nolan's legal team prepared for trial, gathering witness statements and lining up character references. Meanwhile, the co-working space thrived, drawing local media attention that helped offset negative stories tied to Eric's crimes. When a local journalist came to interview the new tenants, they praised the rebirth of the Sanders mansion, a testament to turning adversity into innovation. With each passing day, the gardens outside began to bloom with a renewed vigor. April, along with volunteers from the community, had planted rows of herbs, flowers, and vegetables. On weekends, families strolled through the paths, marveling at the transformation. The once nearly abandoned estate now felt alive, pulsing with shared hope. One afternoon, as April knelt in a flower bed, pruning marigolds, Nolan approached, hands tucked into his pockets. She tilted her head up, smiling at the sight of him. He wore casual jeans and a light jacket, having shed the formal suits he'd been buried in for months. "Beautiful," he remarked, gaze sweeping over the bright blossoms. April grinned. "They are, aren't they? I've never actually tended a garden before, but the volunteers have shown me the ropes." He crouched down beside her, gently touching a budding sunflower. "I've been so focused on corporate strategies that I almost forgot how satisfying it is to watch something grow from the ground up." She set her pruning shears aside. "It's grounding." "Literal new life." He nodded, studying her. "And how about you? After everything, are you happier here?" Warmth spread through her chest. "Yes. Despite the chaos with Eric, I finally feel part of something that matters, something that isn't just about survival." Nolan's eyes softened. "I'm glad." He glanced over his shoulder at the mansion. "I used to think these walls defined me, that if I couldn't maintain my father's standards, I'd be a disappointment. But seeing people use these spaces for new ventures, feeling the garden flourish, it's like letting go of old ghosts." She reached out, brushing a smudge of soil from his sleeve. "Letting go can be freeing." He caught her wrist lightly, voice tinged with gratitude. "You helped me see that, and I want to keep moving forward. With you by my side, if that's something you want too." Her pulse quickened. "I do," she answered softly. The sincerity in his eyes made her heart flutter. They had come a long way from that first bucket of water encounter. Just then, Mariam called from across the courtyard, waving a phone. "April, Nolan, the lawyers want to schedule another meeting. Something about a final settlement offer from Eric's side." Nolan rose to his feet, face hardening. "Settlement? After all this, he still wants to negotiate." April stood as well, dusting her hands. "Let's see what they have to say. Maybe it's just standard procedure." Together, they crossed the lawn, leaving the garden behind. Though neither voiced it, they both harbored a quiet dread. Settlement talks implied Eric might try one last maneuver to avoid a full trial, which could mean anything from hush money to partial admissions of guilt. But after everything Eric had done, neither April nor Nolan felt inclined to let him slip away unscathed. When they reached Mariam, she handed Nolan the phone. He walked a few paces away to talk in private. April exchanged a glance with her friend, nerves swirling. "Think Eric's lawyer is desperate?" Mariam shrugged. "Likely. Eric can't weasel out of the break-in charges now that the cops have evidence connecting him to the window and footprints." She paused, then added quietly, "But be careful, he's still cunning." April nodded, pressing her lips together. Cunning didn't even begin to cover it. Eric had upended their lives once. She wouldn't put anything past him. Nolan returned, slipping his phone into his pocket. "They want a meeting at the attorney's office tomorrow morning." Apparently, Eric's team is suggesting a plea deal. He might plead guilty to some charges in exchange for reduced sentencing. They also want an NDA to keep certain financial details confidential. April blew out a breath. "How do you feel about that?" He set a steady hand on her shoulder, angry that he's trying to wriggle out of full accountability. "But we have to hear them out. It might expedite closure and spare us a drawn-out trial. The question is, do we want closure bad enough to see him get a lighter penalty?" Her thoughts darted to the stolen documents, the humiliating confrontation, the heartbreak he'd caused both of them. "If it means you can move on, if it means we can all move on, it might be worth considering." Nolan's gaze swept the vibrant flowers behind them, then returned to her. "We'll decide together," he said, voice resolute. "He's taken too much power from us already. This time, we choose our own path." April felt a surge of resolve. "Yes," she thought, "this time we stand on equal footing." The seeds of renewal they'd planted were bearing fruit in more ways than one, and she was determined not to let Eric cast his shadow over their hard-earned happiness any longer. The next morning, April and Nolan sat side by side in the glossy conference room of Nolan's attorney's office. A long rectangular table separated them from Eric, who was flanked by his own lawyer. The air crackled with tension, each side weighing outcomes that could reshape their futures. Eric wore a subdued expression, nothing like the smug grin of before. The stress of looming legal consequences etched deep lines across his face. His lawyer, a wiry man with sharp eyes, launched into a prepared statement. Eric was ready to plead guilty to misdemeanor theft and trespassing, avoiding felony charges if Nolan agreed to an NDA on certain financial documents. Eric would pay partial restitution, though far less than the damages listed. Nolan's lawyer, a measured middle-aged woman named Ms. Bennett, kept her expression neutral. She glanced at Nolan for input. He studied Eric, then spoke calmly. "You admit you broke into my estate, stole documents, and used them for blackmail. Yet you want a plea deal to reduce your punishment," Eric's lawyer offered a curt nod. "My client acknowledges wrongdoing, but we maintain that the intention was to reveal questionable dealings tied to your late father's legacy, financial records that were never made public." A spike of anger flared in April's chest at the deflection. "That's not an excuse," she said, voice trembling. "You used them to blackmail Nolan in front of investors." Eric's gaze flickered to her, then away. He pressed his lips into a thin line, but said nothing. "Ms." Bennett cleared her throat, redirecting the conversation. "Mr. Sanders has the right to decline any plea deal that fails to adequately address the harm caused by your client's actions. The attempted extortion, in particular, is grave." Eric finally spoke. "Look, I never wanted it to go this far. It was business, just trying to get a shot at success. But I made mistakes." His voice lacked the confidence it once held, sounding almost hollow. Nolan let out a slow breath. "If we accept this deal, you'll avoid a lengthy trial and potential prison time. But you'll have a criminal record and owe restitution. Any future attempt to harass me or April will violate the agreement and result in immediate legal action. Understood?" Eric nodded, eyes downcast. "I get it." April's heart thumped. She dreamed of a scenario where Eric faced the full weight of his crimes, long jail time, public disgrace. Yet seeing him now, deflated, made the victory feel bittersweet. He's finally cornered. She had no sympathy left for him, but also no desire to let hatred consume her. Ms. Bennett addressed them in a businesslike tone. Mr. Sanders, Ms. Mitchell, do you wish to accept the proposed terms with amendments regarding the restraining order and additional restitution, or do you prefer to proceed to trial? Nolan glanced at April, a silent question in his eyes. She thought about the months of turmoil, the cost, emotional and financial, that a drawn-out trial would bring. The co-working space, the garden, her new responsibilities. Could they truly move forward if they were stuck in court battles? I think we've all suffered enough, she murmured, voice quavering. If Eric accepts guilt and pays for damages, maybe it's time to close this chapter. Nolan inhaled sharply, tension rippling through him. Then he gave a brief nod. We'll accept the plea deal with Mrs. Bennett's recommended amendments. Full restitution for property damage, acknowledgement of extortion, and a restraining order preventing any future contact with us, personally or professionally. Miss Bennett made notes, and Eric's lawyer nodded in agreement. We'll finalize the paperwork. The court will schedule a hearing to confirm the plea. Eric barely lifted his gaze. Thanks, he muttered, sounding defeated. April found little satisfaction in his gratitude. At least we're done, she told herself, leaning back in her chair with a weariness that reached her bones. When the meeting adjourned, Eric filed out with his lawyer. He paused at the door, casting a final glance at April. Something flickered in his eyes, regret or resignation. She couldn't tell. Then he was gone, leaving behind the weight of a history she'd once believed she couldn't escape. Nolan touched her shoulder gently. Are you okay? She released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. I think so. Just processing. He nodded, eyes reflecting the same exhaustion. I'm relieved it's over, at least in a legal sense. We'll have a hearing, but it's mostly a formality now. Ms. Bennett offered them both a small smile. Congratulations on reaching closure. I'll handle the filings. Let me know if you have any questions. They expressed their thanks and left the building. Outside, crisp morning sunshine warmed April's face. The city's noise and bustle wrapped around them, a reminder that life kept moving, no matter the storms weathered. Nolan slipped his hand into hers, drawing her close. Let's get some fresh air, he said gently. Maybe a walk by the waterfront. She felt tears prick her eyes at his thoughtful suggestion. The memory of their first dinner date came rushing back. How nervous they'd been, how hopeful. So much has changed, she thought, giving his hand a slight squeeze. I'd love that. Arm in arm, they strolled away from the imposing courthouse, stepping into a future that, while uncertain, belonged to them. For once, April felt something close to peace settle in her chest. The final stand against Eric was done. Not perfect, not entirely fair, but done. And for the first time, she believed they had the freedom to look ahead without fear. A few weeks later, the Sanders mansion buzzed with a spirited weekend event. Families and local entrepreneurs mingled among pop-up stands offering fresh produce from the garden, handmade crafts, and even a small coffee station staffed by Mariam, who served lattes with artistic foam designs. Children darted between tables, giggling at the bright balloons waving in the summer breeze. Music drifted from a small stage near the courtyard, where a local band performed laid-back tunes. April stood by a trellis of climbing roses, watching the scene with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. She'd helped orchestrate the entire day, a community open house, as part of her role in the mansion's evolving identity. The once empty halls were alive with laughter and possibility. Nolan approached, a relaxed smile lighting his features. He wore jeans and a casual button-up, embodying the balance he'd found between formality and warmth. In his hand, he carried 2 cups of lemonade, offering one to April. "You've outdone yourself," he said, tipping his cup toward the throng. "Look at all these people. So much joy in this place now." She blushed, sipping her drink. "It's thanks to you, too. You took a risk, opening the mansion to the community, and people love it." She gestured toward the co-working wing. "We're officially booked up for the next 6 months. I have a wait list of local businesses wanting to join." He let out a soft laugh. "Guess I'll have to expand again." They strolled through the garden, passing rows of lush vegetables and fragrant herbs. Volunteers explained planting techniques to curious visitors, while kids crouched down to examine earthworms in the soil. The air hummed with life. At the far end of a new walking path, April and Nolan paused by a simple wooden bench. Its plaque read, "In honor of new beginnings." She touched the bench's back, smiling. "I love that you dedicated this to everyone who helped rebuild." Nolan's gaze lingered on her. "This bench is for all of us, especially for you. Without your heart, your resilience, I'm not sure I'd have found the courage to reinvent this place." She brushed her hair aside, heart fluttering. "I'm just grateful to be part of it and to be here with you." He reached out, gently taking her hand. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on their faces. "About that, there's something I've been wanting to ask." Her pulse quickened at his tone. "Yes." He hesitated, then cleared his throat, a slightly sheepish grin breaking across his face. "Not a proposal, if that's what you're thinking," he teased, his own cheeks coloring. "But I'd like you to move in if you want. The mansion's huge, and there's no reason for you to be struggling with rent or living so far away from this project you pour your heart into." She caught her breath. Part of her had wondered if they'd reach this moment, but the reality still stunned her. "Move in, are you sure? That's a big step," he finished softly. "Yes, I know, but we've been through a lot together. If we can survive lawsuits and sabotage, maybe sharing a home isn't so scary." Her eyes misted. She thought of her tiny apartment, the chipped paint on the walls, the memories of Eric's harassing calls. Here, she had a chance at a fresh start. No secrets, no fear, just an honest life shared with someone who believed in her. "I'd love to," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. Nolan's grin broadened, relief shining in his eyes. He gently cupped her cheek and leaned in, kissing her under the soft rustle of the roses overhead. Her heart soared, capturing a moment that felt like pure promise. All around, the hum of the open house carried on, children laughing, neighbors chatting, the band playing cheerful chords. But in that instant, it was just the two of them, choosing each other and a future bright with possibility. They pulled apart, beaming. Taking her hand, he guided her back toward the main lawn, where Mariam waved excitedly. Cameras from local press snapped photos of the thriving event, and the sweet smell of fresh lemonade mingled with the breeze. For a brief second, April closed her eyes, remembering how it all began. A misunderstanding, a bucket of water, a man she thought was an intruder in a lonely mansion. Now that mansion pulsed with life and love, no longer a silent fortress, but a welcoming sanctuary for growth and community. "This is our final image," she thought, heart swelling with gratitude. The quiet, uncertain woman she'd been was gone, replaced by someone who took risks, stood up for herself, and found belonging in the most unexpected place. Nolan had learned, too, that his worth wasn't tied to his father's shadow, but could blossom under the light of his own vision. Arm in arm, they moved through the crowd, greeting well-wishers, receiving hugs and handshakes of congratulations. The haunting echoes of scandal and shame had finally faded, replaced by a chorus of warm voices celebrating a new era. Beneath the swaying branches of an old oak tree, they paused once more, just to inhale the moment. Joy radiated from every corner, from the co-working desks filled with ambitious thinkers to the garden bursting with bright blooms. And at the center of it all stood April and Nolan, proof that from the wreckage of broken dreams, one could build something far stronger, far more beautiful. Together, they stepped into the sunshine, letting the music and laughter wash over them, leaving the past behind. This was their story, written in resilience, bound by trust, and lit by a love that promised to endure no matter what storms might come. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.